Oh, hello. Beautiful creatures of the internet. I'm Mango Jones. I'm running so far behind, but, small human life, what have you. I'm sorry I'm late, y'all. Really. Before we get started, as always, in the description, you will find links to resources. You will find the links to the rest of the people that I share StreamYard with, the Stream Pervs. You will find the LinkTree of Things. Whatever. And you will also find, which I'm about to put in the chat right now, the link to the Google Drive of legal filings. Now, before we get into the rest of Alex Murdaugh's testimony, I have a theory. And it actually checks out. Like, looking at everything, it would check out. So we're going to go over that. Hey, Beck. Beck, I think you're going to like this. This is going to be fun. Where are you, folder? Richard Alexander. Go get your snacks, Fit. Hey, Graveyard Flowers. Okay. Copy that. All right, so there is the Google Drive for people. Pin that. Okay, so before we get into my theory, we have to go over some history. Okay? It's going to be legal law history lesson time. Part of your degree. But when you finish the case with me, you do get a petty law degree from Petty University in White Ridge Law. Okay? So pay attention. Take some notes. Now, as we know, the first Randolph Murdaugh, he's the one that founded the law firm. It was a private law firm, and he founded it in 1910. Well, it was public in 1910. When he became solicitor, he was elected solicitor in 1916, the firm became private. He just did, personal injury stuff, mostly with businesses like railroads, things like that. So, because he was, public figure, private law firm. It worked. Now, in 1938, the first buster, Randolph Jr., he graduated law school and he joined the law firm. Two years later, Murdaugh Sr., he passes away. Train wreck. And Randolph Jr. takes over as solicitor, keeping the firm private and being a public solicitor. Makes sense. Well, in the early 1950s, Clyde Eltzroth and Robert Peters joined the firm. They change the name of the firm. It becomes public again. They start handling personal injury things, railroad stuff. They name it Murdaugh, Eltzroth, and Peters. Go figure. In 1956, the first buster is actually indicted by a federal grand jury for allegedly warning a bootlegger to move a still into a neighboring county to avoid the police. He was a public solicitor telling a bootlegger how to keep being a bootlegger and not get arrested. Which, I mean, don't get me wrong, that's pretty sweet, but still, you're a solicitor. You're not supposed to do that. Buster, he had a reputation in the courtroom. He was widely regarded as one of the best trial attorneys in the state, despite the fact that he was fussed at by the South Carolina Supreme Court multiple times over for how he acted and things that he would say during closing arguments in death penalty cases. Because, it's a small town. Even though the entire district covers 5 counties, these aren't big places. Public trial is probably going to be the most entertaining thing that people went to. So they would ham it up. They would play to the audience. They would reenact scenes and they would get really into it. So, of course, people are going to like him. He's entertaining. In 1957, the first buster helped found the South Carolina Trial Lawyers Association. 1964, Randolph III joins after he graduates law school. Now, 1971, we've heard this name come up in court multiple times over. John Parker. John E. Parker. Currently what the law firm is named after, John Parker. He joins as an assistant and then officially joins the firm in 1973 at the exact same time that Clyde Ellsworth Jr., who they called Jack, joined. And the reason that Jack joined upon graduating is because his dad, Clyde Ellsworth Sr., whose name is on the firm, was elected to circuit court judge for the 14th Judicial Circuit. So now you've got Randolph Murdaugh Jr. serving as the solicitor for the 14th Circuit, and his partner from his law firm, Clyde Ellsworth, as your circuit court judge. Now, a second branch for the law firm opened up in Ridgeland in 1980, and a guy named Danny Henderson joined to run Ridgeland. The name of the firm officially changes to Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Ellsworth, and Dietrich. Now, the majority of cases that PMPED focused on were representing rail workers, personal injury, wrongful death, things like that. But they kind of started a shift in what they were focusing on because the South Carolina Supreme Court finally made a determination on a law that was badly written, but it opened them up to even more opportunity because it was still vague. Okay? So when you're filing a lawsuit and you're determining venue, South Carolina Code 15-7-30 at the time, which established the basis for forum in a legal action, read, "The action shall be tried in the county in which the defendant resides at the time of the commencement of the action," aka where it happened. If more than one defendant, if there's more than one defendant, the action may be tried in any county in which one or more of the defendants to such action resides at the time of the commencement of the action. If none of the parties shall reside in the state, the action may be tried in any county which the plaintiff shall designate in his complaint. AKA, you could live fucking anywhere and file a lawsuit against another person in South Carolina. But a lot of times with major lawsuits against corporations, what would happen is it would end up going to the Supreme Court for a determination on what is venue, because the other code that most people would use to determine whether or not a corporation resides was South Carolina Code 15-9-210, which is Service of Process on Domestic Corporations. And it reads, "Service as effected under the terms of this section shall be effective and confer jurisdiction over any domestic or foreign corporation in any county where such domestic or foreign corporation shall own property and transact business, regardless of whether or not such domestic or foreign corporation maintains an office or has agency." So if you could serve them paperwork, it was fine. But again, still vague. So what ended up happening, oh, hey Mo, hey Graveyard, hey Skits. I didn't remember if I said hi. Anyway. Well, the thing is, like, that was for domestic corporations. They never really talked about foreign corporations or anything. So it was up in the air. And PMPED wasn't going to mess with corporations that, like, they weren't going to try it. They were working on personal injury stuff. They were keeping their name intact, I suppose. But in 1982, the South Carolina Supreme Court ended up coming to a conclusion on what qualified as a corporation's venue. The 3 locations that they determined were county where a domestic corporation has its principal place of business, county where a domestic or foreign corporation maintains office and agent for the transaction of business, or county where a domestic or foreign corporation owns property or transacts business. Again, super vague, but that opens the door. Because now you know exactly what a foreign corporation is determined to be when you live in the state. But the rule still says that if you don't live in the state and neither does the other party, you can still file here. It's wild. I digress. So, a few years later, 1986, Randolph Jr. retires from his position as solicitor after 46 years. In those 46 years, whenever he ran for solicitor, he had only ever been opposed twice. He currently is the longest serving solicitor in the United States. And Randolph III takes over as solicitor and names Johnny Parker as president of PMPED. But you know, even when you name someone as president of something and you still own it and you still have a vested interest in it, they're still going to turn to you for big decisions. Just throwing that out there. 1989, Mark Ball joins. 1991, Randolph Randy Murdaugh IV joins the firm. So, knowing what the law is about what you can and cannot file within the state, 1993, PMPED helped a woman named Gail Taylor file a medical malpractice suit against a Hilton Head doctor with the last name Medinica? I don't want to mispronounce that. And they also filed against Cancer Immunobiology Laboratory Incorporated. Gail went to a lawyer in Charleston, in Hilton Head, to file against the doctor. But because of the way that our laws are, she was able to go to Hampton and file against the Cancer Immunobiology Laboratory because she doesn't live there and neither does the company. The company's not there. She's from Atlanta. She has a lawyer in Atlanta. So she was able to file in all 3 places because 2 of them were in South Carolina and our laws are fucked. So they're dealing with that lawsuit. 1994, Ronnie Crosby joins the firm. And then in 1995, a jury in Hampton County, South Carolina, awarded Gail Taylor $14 million as a result of her medical malpractice lawsuit. $13 times more than the average. And the success of this lawsuit The fact that going to court's just one of the funnest things and you can just have a good time, that caused an uptick in what PMPED was doing. They went from focusing primarily on personal injury and helping the people to going after corporations. 1998, Alex joined the firm. Alex had previously been in a different law firm. He graduated in 1994 and he went and he worked with Fleming. But then he came over to PMPED. Now, in 1999, they filed their first lawsuit against CSX Railroad. Okay. And they filed it for an employee who hurt his back in Charleston. But because the railroad because the train just drives through Hampton, it technically had residents as a corporation. And because it's the good old boys club and everyone knows everyone and Murdaugh's respected and Parker's running his law firm and doing all of this, they're not going to change venue. How would you change venue as a corporation if you don't know about the good old boys club? So that plaintiff won $1 million in judgment. Now, Attorney Parker, John Parker, he's friends with Attorney Buckner of the Buckner Law Firm. And then in 2000, when Attorney Buckner was elected to a state judgeship, Parker got permission from Murdaugh to buy the Buckner Law Firm, building and all, for an undisclosed amount of money. And at the same time, they opened up a third PMPED office in Walterboro. And some guy named Bert Skip Utzi joined the firm to run the Walterboro office. In 2002, you have Hampton County Judge Gerald C. Smoke Sr., who presided over a lot of PMPED's cases in his 10-year judgeship, retire and go back to practicing law with his buddies over at PMPED Hampton. Mind you, Randolph III, your state solicitor, who knows these judges, who's probably really good friends with these judges, still owns the law firm and still makes the final call on a bunch of decisions. Because it's a civil firm. It's not criminal. They can have that separation. You know what I mean? Between 2002 and 2004, the firm exploited the venue rule so much that there were really weird lawsuits they were able to file and win. They filed a suit for a woman suing Continental Air because the airline, quote, does business in Hampton by selling tickets online. They were able to sue GM and Cooper Tire, both in other states, over an accident that happened in Tennessee. The number of lawsuits that filed in the Lowcountry, especially those within the 14th Judicial Circuit, where there's 3 PMPED law offices, it jumped so high. And then you also had the fact that if you wanted to file a change of venue, because, you know, the Supreme Court, the South Carolina Supreme Court, they were like, this is bad. We really need to fix this. We should get together and try and fix this. Well, if you filed a lawsuit in Hampton County, but then you also filed a change of venue, those lawyers that work in Hampton would file so many unnecessary subpoenas, it would force you to settle. Mark Tinsley, our dude that was on the stand testifying against Murdaugh, who did not work at his law firm, but he did use this tactic. If he thought you were changing that venue because you you were scared or something, you had no other reason to, he would file subpoenas wondering if you had been talking to the railroads or to Walmart or to any of these other corporations that did not like the fact that our venue laws are so lax. We're trying to push for the South Carolina Supreme Court to change the law. Walmart was looking at opening a new store in Varnville. Varnville, like, it's a poor area. Jobs are needed. There are food deserts all over the Lowcountry. A lawyer in Columbia advised Walmart to not build a store because the chances of them getting sued and closing were really fucking high. That took away a good 200-300 jobs from the area that needed it. Multiple big name corporations that were tired of being sued by people like PMPED quit doing business in the Lowcountry. Or they would just say fuck it and settle out because it was easier. And John Parker, all of the guys at PMPED, they know about their connections. They were aware of their connections. There is a Forbes article from 2002 where he is being interviewed about people knowing everything. And he was like, well, then the defendant can go file a change of venue. It's not illegal to have friendships and relationships. He doesn't see it. They don't see it as a conflict of interest. They're comfortable. They're very comfortable in what they had been doing. Hey, Sydney. So in 2005, the South Carolina Supreme Court, with the backings up of multiple corporations, including Delta, Walmart, Sprint, they changed the law. They changed what the venue law was. Now the venue law has a whole bunch of stipulations in it. And at the same time that they changed this venue law, Randolph retires as solicitor. Randolph III retires as solicitor at the same time they change the venue law. And what does he do? He goes back to working at PMPED. He goes back. And they go back to working on private citizen cases. And small cases. And local places. But it's really odd how comfortable everyone was. How comfortable everyone's doing things. And the fact that the family that owns Palmetto State Bank, they've been friends with the Murdaughs for life. Chris Wilson was Alex Murdaugh's best friend in law school. All of these people know each other. So he goes back to doing his thing. And as time has gone on, you have people that are older in the firm that are leaving, that are going to other places and other areas within law. So you got Jack Ellsroth, who joins the Hampton County Election Commission. Parker Henderson other members of the firm served on the board of governors. Robert Peters served on the very first Hampton County Council. And when Randolph III retired from his position as solicitor, their current solicitor in Hampton County is someone that they all approved of. It's someone that Randolph, who was, again, still in charge of everything, approved of. Now, they have a lot of clients. They've had a lot of clients. You know, they got a nice little setup going in all 3 counties. Everything's working out just fine. But then the stuff about Alex comes out. Or at least it starts to. It starts with the boat crash. The boat crash happened February 2019. Mind you, things had been real quiet. But the Good Old Boys Club was still the Good Old Boys Club. And you have the boat crash. Following the boat crash, there were multiple times throughout the course of the investigation that people working on the investigation were asked, do you know this family? Do you know who these people are? Are you aware? The cops would lie. The local cops would lie to SLED, to other agents, and say that they didn't. The lead investigator for Hampton, or for Colleton, sorry, he was asked multiple times over, do you know them? Do you know them? Do you know them? And finally, he was like, oh yeah, my wife worked at the law firm. Just casually leave out that your wife worked at PMPED. That doesn't make sense. You had people that would openly say, yes, I knew them. You would have the officers allowing people like Maggie Murdaugh and John Marvin Murdaugh and Alex Murdaugh behind the tape at the boat crash site. But they would not allow Mallory Beach's mother be on the tape. Maggie Murdaugh was seen on the boat hiding beer and coolers. She was hiding evidence from the boat. The boat itself got put into the custody of John Marvin. John Marvin's not even a lawyer. He has a criminal justice degree, but he owns a rental store for equipment, bulldozers and stuff. But everyone knows who it is. They know who the Murdaughs are. Everyone's aware of the type of hold they have on the county, especially when you have people on the governor's board, multiple judges that will retire and join your firm, people that will get elected to office from your firm. So whenever you hear someone like John Marvin Murdaugh or Alex Murdaugh or anyone say, oh, well, I don't see us as being prominent. We're just like other people. We're like everyone. No, you're not. You're absolutely not. Especially when Alex can walk into a sheriff's office and ask for blue lights on his personal vehicle when solicitors don't even get blue lights on their vehicles or a government vehicle. And he was a volunteer solicitor. What? But in any case, so mind you, at this time, what we know from what the investigation into Alex Murdaugh has shown us is that he's been stealing money for years, right? We know this for a fact. It's everywhere. But what don't we know is the real question. Because you need to consider that he's been lifelong friends with the owner of Palmetto State Bank. Their families have known each other forever. Chris Wilson has been friends with Alex since 1993, since before 1993. We know of the fake Forge account because it was Alex's. We know that he signed over the house to Maggie in 2015, December, for $5 in love and affection. We know that he hired Dick Harpoolian, whatever, Dick, his defense attorney for this trial. We know that Alex Murdaugh initially hired him for the Buster stuff, or for the Paul stuff, sorry. So he's got Dick hired for the Paul stuff. Paul was able to get his mugshot taken inside of an office, and he was able to be escorted out of a back door. There was a judge that signed off on the Satterfield settlement, and she saw exactly how much money was on that settlement, and she still signed it. And the thing is, when that paperwork was officially filed, that last page was gone. That last page was never public record. The only reason that the last page became public record is because a journalist found it. There's so many lawyers at that firm that work in the 14th Judicial Circuit where their buddy is solicitor. Their friends get elected to be the county judge. What other last pages are missing on settlements? Anyway, so we know about crash. We know that a bunch of people involved in the boat crash lied about knowing the family. Maggie's hiding beers. John Marvin's getting custody of the boat. Slowly but surely, things are trickling out about Alex's wrongdoings. And kind of just like weird things about the family, you know, like, what's up with them? So, June 7th. Well, the weekend leading up to it was kind of weird because, okay, it's not unreasonable at all that Randolph III would need to go to the hospital in Savannah. That was his hospital. He loved the people that worked there. That was his place to go. He preferred them. So he went to them. What sits odd with me is the fact that it was very much made a point to text the group chat with just Maggie, Paul, Buster, Alex, Randy, John, and ask who all's going to go see him. Just them. That was the core group that got that text. Maggie, her phone record seemed very normal that day. From what they have given us, from the records that we have seen, her life was going normal that day. She talked to her sister, Marion. She talked to Paul. We know that Alex had insisted that Paul come over to fix something that CB Rowe messed up. Paul didn't want to go over, but it's his dad. He's kind of indebted to him at this point since he's keeping him out of jail while awaiting trial on 3 indictments. Alex has made it a point, allegedly, to make sure that the GPS on his phone and Maggie's phone is off. He makes it a point to talk to Jay Parker of the law firm, 858 seconds, deleted from the phone. He talked to Robert Boyle, who also works at the law firm. You just left work. He left work at 6:24 p.m. But you're talking to your law partners on your way home. Alex is still trying to talk to Maggie, but every time he talks to Maggie before a certain moment in time, it shows up on the phone record. It's there. It's present. All the calls between Paul and Maggie, present. Alex talking to Jay Parker, Alex talking to Maggie's mom. That's on his phone record. Because he talked to her. Well, he was waiting to hear back from Maggie. He did talk to his mother. To her mother. But Rogan Gibson, his phone record was pulled. His stuff's there, and he's got people that we don't know who they are. But they had to pull it because of the number of times that Alex tried to call him later that night. But I digress. When Alex leaves the property, when Alex leaves Moselle, he left Moselle out of the front gate at 9:07:06. He left at 9:07. He left the Moselle property at 9:07 out of the front gate. Drove over where Maggie's phone was found, 9:08:42. Messages Maggie, 9:08:58. He calls and talks to Buster at 9:10:47. Deleted from his phone. He calls Chris Wilson, his best friend and lawyer buddy. 9:12:14. Deleted from his phone. He calls John Marvin Murdaugh. 9:18:46. Deleted from his phone. Chris Wilson calls Alex at 9:20:34. Deleted from his phone. In the time it took for him to get from Moselle to Alameda, which is about 8 minutes, he drove slow. He talked to 2 of his partners. He talked to his son, the one that he likes, apparently. And he talked to John Marvin. All on the way there. This is after the time of death. After we have had confirmed in his testimony that we listened to last night that he was at the kennels and he left the property. Sometime around the time that they were murdered. But he didn't do it, guys, remember? Just saying. Continuing. When he leaves Alameda, when he is driving back home, he texts Maggie, calls Maggie, both deleted. Calls Paul, deleted. Then he makes it a point to text Chris Wilson, call me if you're up. 9:52. Gets a call a few seconds later from Chris Wilson. Got another call, 9:53, from Chris Wilson. Make sure that he talks to Buster and them. Maggie's phone's showing activity, but he can't delete that activity. It's laying in the road. We know that when he gets to the kennels, it's 10:05:57. He calls 911 at 10:06:14. When he is on the phone with 911, he makes it a point to lie. He informs them that he's gone over to see them. He's touched them. Doesn't know when he touched them, but he touched them. He tried to roll Paul over. It's the boat threats. It's the boat threats. Threats from the boat. It's very calculated. He gets off the phone, 911, at 10:17 because he says that he has to go call family. Well, he does. He called Randy at 10:17:46. It was answered. The call was answered. He talked to Randy. Deleted from his phone. And the next minute, 10:18, he sends Randy a text. Please call me, emergency. Not deleted. Paul's phone's lighting up. And at the same time that Paul's phone is lighting up, Alex is trying to call Rogan. Alex calls John Marvin and talks to John Marvin, 10:19, deleted from his phone. He talks to his sister-in-law, Christy, does not show on his phone. He ignored a group text to keep trying to call Rogan. He puts Paul's phone back because it doesn't light up anymore. And the first deputy arrives on scene at 10:25. When the deputy is there, he says that he needs to call someone, and he calls Randy. Randy answers. Randy's on the phone when he's on camera. We see that. He tried to FaceTime Rogan, and we know this because it actually showed up on the phone record. He didn't delete it. Now, Alex calls John Marvin at 10:35, talks to him. That shows up. He talks to Randy again. At 10:38, he checks his group text. At 10:40, he Googles a restaurant. 10:44, he finally calls Buster. Even though he talked to Buster not that long after Maggie and Paul passed. $10:44, he talks to Buster again. 10:45, he calls Brooklyn, who is Buster's girlfriend. She doesn't answer. Doesn't show up on his phone. He calls Brooklyn's mother. Doesn't show up on his phone. Buster tries to call Maggie. Buster tries to call Rogan. Alex sends the group text to Buster, Tracy, and Brooklyn saying, "Call me urgent." But you just talked to Buster. But she deleted it from your phone. Buster calls him, talks to him, 10:47. It's not on his phone either. 10:55, he calls Brian White, who still doesn't know why Alex tried to call him. But I think I do. And then at 10:56, Buster called Alex again. Not on the phone. Hold on, I'm pulling something. From what we know, from what we understand, from what has been given to us in testimony, we know that all of the members of the Good Old Boys Club and Buster made their way to Moselle. We know that the story, as it's been told, in a couple of different wrong ways, because he gets his facts wrong every time, because it's a lie. He allegedly went up to the bodies. He tried to check them for a pulse. He grabbed Paul's phone because it popped out of his pocket when he tried to roll him over. He just put it back on him. It's because of the threats from the boat. What the threats were, we don't know. He never gave a detail. He said that very vile things were said on social media. He should have taken those threats seriously. He's been assaulted in public. We know he said these things because they are on film. In 3 different ways. On the 8th, we know that SLED investigates the house. We know that SLED has seen both Randy and John Marvin on camera hanging out in the pool room while they're looking around. We are going to listen to John Marvin's testimony for today, and it's very telling to me. But continuing. Following this, Alex willingly meets up with the deputies on the 8th. He meets up with them again on the 10th. He willingly has his phone extracted, and all of the calls that he made that night are gone. There is no proof that they have that he talked to Buster, or Chris, or John Marvin, or Jay Parker, or Randy. On June 17th, 10 days after the murders, Randy and John Marvin Murdaugh go on Good Morning America to, quote, show support for their brother. They said, actually, this is a quote from John Marvin. I didn't think it was a credible threat. If it was, I would have tried to do something or notify someone. And he did not elaborate on what the nature of the threats were. He said this on national television. Randy said, you hear all of this talk on social media with regard to Paul. I don't know of anybody that would truly be an enemy or truly want to harm them. They insisted that their family is being wrongly portrayed in the media, and saying words like dynasty and power are bad. They're just regular people. They deny that the family has used its legal ties to help protect Paul in the boat accident. They both say that Paul has no known enemies, but it was because of the boat threats. The same story that Alex Murdaugh tried to sell in a very bad way to the cops and to 911. They didn't think the threat was credible. But you're going to hear John Marvin say he didn't know about the threats. He wasn't aware of them until it happened, you know? After those interviews happen, and we're getting into September, Alex has signed over, and Buster has signed over, anything having to do with Paul's estate. Paul's not going to have anything anyway. Nothing's in his name. It's going to be an open shut thing for probate, so no big deal. Moselle is in Maggie's estate. Maggie had a last will and testament. She signed that initially August 5th, 2005. And then she changed it on August 15th, 2005. Her sister was the person in charge of the estate. But Maggie went back, crossed out her sister's name, wrote in Randolph Murdaugh III, and signed off on it. So, they haven't done anything with Maggie's estate yet. But Paul's is signed off and good to go. August 27th, Randy takes over Paul's estate. He becomes the executor of the estate. He is in charge. Good shit. On the 3rd, that is allegedly, because I don't fucking buy it anymore. Allegedly, Alex gets confronted by his partners about money. That's when he gets confronted, allegedly. And he resigns. He's told us in his testimony that what he ended up doing was wanting to get more pills, and he got shot on the side of the road on Saturday. We already know that he arranged to have someone shoot him. We already know that that's the thing that he did. That's all well and good. But what we didn't know was that because of that last page in the Satterfield settlement, the one that had not been given to the Satterfields, And they had been waiting to hear back and find out when they were going to get the help they needed. There was an investigation that had been launched into Alex. On the 6th, we know that Alex gets out of the hospital for his head wound. His superficial head wound, by the way, that was missing and had no evidence of 2 weeks later when he was arrested. But I digress. He gets out and he's with Randy and Alex and John Marvin, the three of them. They're going to take Alex to rehab. He's going to check into rehab. But the thing is, they keep saying that he was checking into a place in Georgia. But his facility was in Florida. We have the extradition. We know he was in Florida. They changed the story so that they could say he went to detox in Georgia. And then after his first court appearance, he went to rehab in Florida. That first 7 indictments came through. In September of 2021. That's when his first set of charges started to come in. And what ended up happening was he went to court. It was personal recognizance. And then he went back to rehab. That's the thing, though, Beck. I wholeheartedly believe, and this is just my opinion, that Richard Alexander Murdaugh recreationally used pills. I think he did them for fun because he got drunk a bunch. There's evidence that he got drunk a whole hell of a lot. But I firmly believe that he did not have the type of issue he's claiming to. So the indictments start. He gets those first round of charges. He goes back to rehab, comes back, does his thing. Well, at this time, Maggie's estate has to start getting stuff done for probate. They have to start working on that. The law firm, they released a statement on September 6th, the same day that allegedly he went to detox, rehab, whatever. They put out a statement saying that he had resigned the week prior. He's no longer associated with them. And Alex had said to everyone he quit. That's what they claim. As all of these indictments start rolling in, Buster is the only person that legally has access to Richard Alexander Murdaugh's stuff. So what does he do? He starts selling off shit. He's listing properties for sale. He's selling a boat. They're making sure that Alex is getting the money that he needs for lawyers. They're doing the most. More indictments are rolling in. You've got, in December, You have all of the paperwork for Maggie's estate that comes through. Miriam Proctor had to come in and sign an affidavit stating that she didn't know that her name had been crossed off on the last will. She didn't even know that she was on there. And I believe her when she says that. I really do. So when all of that comes in, she gets paperwork asking her to either accept or deny being in charge of it. And she denies. She doesn't want anything to do with it. Probably because the Murdaughs are so fucking messy. Buster, who is not in jail, who does not have a job, who has all this time and could be in charge of his mother's estate, says no. Alex, who is in jail, says no. The estate ends up going over to John Marvin. John Marvin accepts responsibility for Maggie's estate, the estate that has the Moselle property, the estate that, had Richard Alexander Murdaugh not been arrested, he would have gotten the other half of the properties that were in both of their names back. So while he's in charge of it, all of the people that had filed lawsuits. Actually, hold on. I'm getting ahead of myself. I should say this. I forgot this. I'm terribly sorry. I'm all over the place tonight. So the Good Old Boys Club, they did this thing that I'm pretty sure was just like saving face, if you will, because John Parker filed a lawsuit October 29th, 2021. And in this lawsuit, he alleges that he loaned Richard Alexander Murdaugh money in the form of $477,000. He's in jail. If he does something like sign on a confession of judgment, then the court can order the money be given. So what did he do? He signed it. Of course he did. He signed it. His brother, Randy, also sued him for a loan. He was sued by PMPED. And what did he do in all of these situations where he's got his brothers filing lawsuits against him, John Parker, the law firm? He signs an agreement of judgment immediately. Buster's selling off properties. Buster's listing boats for sale. Buster is going with Randy and John to Vegas. So Mark Tinsley, who is doing the Renee Beach lawsuit, he files an emergency motion to try and make it to where he cannot spend any more money. He's got to stop. Can't touch it anymore. Like, it's got to quit. Of course, they tried to disagree with that, but it went through. So you've got two dudes in charge of his assets, which kind of fucks everything up. Because now Buster can't sell anything off. If he wants to pay his lawyers, he's going to have to get a court order to sell things or to do stuff. Well, his indictment from PMPED, it did come through. His buddy over the bank, he got an indictment. His old partner got an indictment. But if you pay very close attention whenever he talks about those financial crimes, he makes it very clear, very concise. It was me. I didn't convince them to do anything. I didn't conspire with them. I didn't do anything. He's very protective of the other people involved. In March of 2022, Alex files a motion so that the state will essentially treat him as having died before Maggie. So that way, the estate will go to Buster. Buster's the only living person left. Buster will be in charge of everything. They listed Moselle for sale. John Marvin did. John Marvin, after the motion filed by Alex Murdaugh was denied because the people in charge of his accounts said, hey, wait, that's illegal. You're trying to move money and break this lawsuit, or this court order. You can't do that. John Marvin did an interview again because he's stupid. And his primary reason for doing the interview was because he sees all these things about him treating the estate wrong. No one wrote articles about him treating the estate wrong. No one was even really paying attention to it, actually. Except for independent news sources, but those are really small. John said in the interview in March 2022 that nobody has asked any of his friends for opinions of his family. He doesn't think that there's anybody that knows the family that's fearful of their family. He doesn't think that the family did anything to protect Paul the night of the boat crash. He said that Randy still works for PMPED. No one has done anything wrong except Alex. He said Randy is constantly giving the police tips and things that were heard on the street to help with the investigation into Paul and Maggie's death. When asked if he thinks that Alex killed his wife and son, he said, in a very Murdaugh way, no, I do not believe he did. Is it possible that he could have? Well, I guess anything's possible, but I don't believe it. I'm certain he did not. That is my belief, and I truly believe that to my core. But I also understand that, maybe I don't know things. Maybe Sled knows more than I do. All I can tell you is what I believe, and I don't believe he had anything to do with it. Yeah. The interview, March 2nd, 2022, or March 2022, is the only time that he had brought up taking Alex to the detox facility. And he said that in Randy and I's conversations, we were very concerned that it was not a random shooting and that it was a suicide attempt. I had real doubts that he was telling the truth. He said that he didn't know about Alex's problem, but he should have realized because he would fall asleep at family holidays. He would fall asleep at family holidays. But when asked about the people that had been suing Alex, when asked about the indictments, he said that the people that are suing are folks that probably need the money. Quote, I've been told that most of them have been repaid. If I were in those shoes, what would I do? I would hope that I could look at you and forgive you. I feel for them. My understanding is that there are some people out there, and I think it was some of the attorneys associated with the case that, were trying to say that I was scheming with Alex or trying to do something I'm certainly not in regards to Maggie's estate. No one said that. No one. But he published this. He put this out here. He said in this article that he talked to Maggie's family and that he's going to discharge his duties as the personal representative of the estate in a lawful manner that makes them proud, Maggie proud, and Buster proud. I want them to know that it's being handled the best that it can. Everything's transparent. Everything was not transparent because while he's having this put out there, the people that are filing lawsuits against Alex are also filing lawsuits against the estate of Maggie Murdaugh, against the estate of Paul Murdaugh, and they add Buster into those lawsuits because Buster provided the ID that Paul used to buy the alcohol. So they can do that. That puts more pressure on Alex to try and settle. Instead, every time they file a creditor claim against the Moselle property in Maggie's estate, John Marvin files the legal paperwork to say no and says, if you want that creditor claim there, you have to do the official legal filing in civil court. So they do. The people in charge of Alex's assets file a creditor claim against the Moselle property in the form of $3.9 million. People that have been indicted along with Alex Murdaugh are accepting what they were charged with. They'll say not guilty, but they're not going to offer up any other information, and they're not going to fight. They haven't fought. Alex got indicted with the murder charges in June 2022. When Alex got indicted with those murder charges, the fraud charges and stuff kept coming through. He also got charged in the form of PMPED. They went ahead and had charges pressed, but the charges were very specific. They weren't anything that was terrible. Just simple shit that we knew. They didn't have to do that. Randy's still in touch with him. He's still talking to John Marvin. He's still doing everything that he can with his family because they love each other. They're family. He's still talking to John Parker. Right before the trial starts, you've got an ADR, an alternative dispute resolution, that happens between Renee Beach's family, or Mallory Beach's family, Morgan Dowdy, Miley Altman, Kenneth Cook, Anthony Cook, the estate of Maggie Murdaugh with John Marvin Murdaugh as the personal representative, the estate of Paul Terry Murdaugh with Randolph Randy Murdaugh IV as personal representative. They sit down and they figure out, fine, you can sell Moselle. But this is why we took issue with Moselle. They told a judge exactly why they took issue with the way that the estate was being run. It was determined that Moselle can sell $500,000 is allowed to go to Buster. A set amount is allowed to go to John Marvin as the personal representative to pay his fees. A set amount has to go to the people in charge of Alex's estate and assets. They have to send that over to him because of the other properties within the estate that have to be sold off. Set amount goes to Kenneth Cook. Set amount goes to Connor Cook. The rest of the money from the sale the sale of Moselle has to be put inside of an account that only the court has access to be able to distribute those funds between Mallory Beach's family, Morgan Dowdy, Miley Altman. And in exchange for all of that, they are going to drop Maggie's estate from the lawsuits with prejudice. They are going to drop John Marvin Murdaugh as personal representative with prejudice. They're going to drop Buster Murdaugh from the lawsuits with prejudice. Then trial started. And they're acting like none of this has happened. Alex Murdaugh has been very set in the things that he'll say. Yeah, he admitted to lying to the cops each time and about what happened, but he won't admit to the fact that when Curtis failed a polygraph, they put out there that it must have been Curtis that did it then, not the boat stuff. They have not put out proof of any of the claims in regards to the boat. All of the people that have been involved with Alex Murdaugh that are from his law firm, that are from the Good Old Boys Club, they have been very selective in the things that they say and how they say it. They pretty much call Alex a shitty lawyer. But you don't just, as a person, you can't just convince another lawyer to help you with this. Because you got Chris Wilson to become the personal representative and the receiver of money for one of those cases that he was indicted on. He did the same thing to Chad Westendorf. Palmetto State Bank allowed him to set up fake accounts. My theory, my personal running theory, based on all of the testimonies, how everyone that has been indicted is going about things, how the family themselves are going about things. My theory is that after the Satterfield last page came out, and there was going to be a lawsuit filed, they started to try and do damage control. And because Alex Murdaugh's name was the one that was involved in that the most, he was the one that got the family to go with Chad Westendorf. He was the one that received the most money from that. He was the one that did everything. He was going to be the fall guy. He allowed for the investigation to happen into him. He didn't offer up any information. He didn't do anything. When someone at the law firm that was not in on it approached him, he knew that something had to be done. Because Moselle was inside of Maggie's estate, had Maggie died, it would have gone to him, Buster, and Paul. If you get rid of Paul, then you don't have to worry about the lawsuits and the indictments and everything that'll come and bring even more shame to the Murdaugh name. So what do? You coordinate it. They're in Georgia. But somehow they were in Georgia, but then he was home in time. John Marvin was, to be able to answer the phone and be 40 minutes away. We needed him. But I digress. If Alex gets rid of Maggie and Paul, Paul's estate will have nothing done to it. The charges will be dropped. Nothing will happen. Moselle will go to Alex. Once Moselle is in Alex's name, what Alex will be able to do is sell off the property, repay money to various places, make sure that all of his shit is handled. And he can bow out of PMPED the way that he did. He called Buster, Randy, and John Marvin. He talked to all of them between the time that he left PMPED and the time that he got to the house. He talked to them on his way to Alameda, where they found the jacket covered in gun residue from where he transported the guns. There is drone footage of him, Buster, and John Marvin removing guns from the Alameda property right before SLED investigates it. This was done to save face and to keep everyone from investigating the law firm as a whole, to keep everyone from investigating the judges involved. He was the fall guy so that the entire thing happening in the Low Country, which everyone knew, from being exposed in a bigger way, on a national scale. We're going to hear the rest of Alex's testimony from Friday. And then we're going to hear John Marvin's testimony from today. And it's all fucking stupid. Because, I mean, in my opinion, if someone were to disgrace my family, whose name was on a law firm, to the point that the name changes to just Parker Law Group, I wouldn't want to work there anymore. But Randy Murdaugh still works for Parker Law Group.
And your intent was to end your life that day, was it not?
It was, no question.
And you were shot but not killed. And then you made up a lie to law enforcement about what happened, right?
That's correct.
Were you trying to protect Curtis Eddie Smith by doing that?
Was I trying to protect Curtis Eddie Smith?
Yes.
I mean, I don't know exactly. It all had to come together so quick. I don't know that I was trying to protect Curtis Eddie Smith. I may have been, but it was just, I wasn't supposed to be there. And then I was.
When you say I wasn't supposed to be there, what do you mean by that?
I intended for him to, I intended to be gone. I intended for him to shoot me, and I intended to be gone. And the one thing, my main concern at that point was that I did not want Buster knowing that I had tried to do that.
Okay.
That was my motivation in telling that story.
I see. Did you eventually voluntarily convey to Agent Kelly and others that that was a fabrication?
I did. After, I don't know, a few days in detox, when I finally got over those initial, just where I could function, I think I told you first, then I think I told Buster, then I think I told Randy and John, and y'all arranged either the next day or 2 days later to come, and we called Ryan Kelly.
Alec, you've lied to your family over many years, have you not?
I lied to my family about my
No. Okay, so from what we know, from how much he's able to steal money from insurance companies, because he's stolen a lot. He's friends with the judges. His buddies are friends with the judges, and the judges sign off on these very large, for no reason, settlement amounts. I think he fully intended on just getting injured and filing a personal injury suit. Or having one of his buddies file the personal injury suit.
addiction.
And you hid from them you were stealing client money, did you not?
Oh, I never, they didn't know anything about that.
And you've lied to your law partners about financial dealings and perhaps your addiction?
Yes.
And you've lied to law enforcement about not going down to the kennels after dinner, but eating dinner and taking a nap. Did you not?
I did.
Alec, did you murder Maggie?
I would never hurt Maggie.
Did you murder Paul?
I would never hurt Paul. If I was under the pressure that they're talking about here, I can promise you I would hurt myself before I would hurt one of them. Without a doubt.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Orders. Police court. You said that you were concerned when you talked to David Owen about the bag of pills in your pocket, correct?
I mean, no, sir, I'm not saying that I was concerned about that. I don't think I told you I was concerned about that. I'm just telling you that was a fact. I had a bag of pills in my pocket, and that was one of the things, that was one of the many things that came together that night.
And you're trying to tell this jury that as a reasonable husband and father in this situation, concern about a bag of pills in your pocket was more important to you than telling law enforcement and narrowing the time when you last saw your wife and son alive. That's what you want to convince this jury of?
No, sir, because I mean, the bag of pills in my pocket was not what I was concerned about sitting in there. It was, as I said, it was one of the many things that was going on, but I wasn't sitting there worried about those pills in my pocket.
You were asked about requesting the phone and automobile data. And that was because as a prosecutor and a lawyer, you had been manufacturing an alibi to cover your tracks.
No, sir, that's absolutely wrong.
You admit you were wrong about a lot of things in what you told law enforcement about June 7th, correct?
I was wrong about things. Some things.
You were asked whether or not you voluntarily confessed to Agent Kelly, but you only did so after being confronted with undeniable information, correct?
No, sir, that's not correct at all. What I was told is that, and I believe this came from Randy, what I was told is that SLED had come up with some information that seemed like it was consistent with my story, and they needed me to verify some things, is what they told me. And, you know, I knew that resources had already been wasted. I didn't want them wasting any more resources. And I told them the truth, but there wasn't any, nobody had presented me with any evidence.
And you just testified that you told Jim Griffin first, correct?
I believe that I told Jim Griffin first.
But at that time, you didn't say anything about those kennels, did you?
To Jim Griffin at that
Correct.
time? No, sir, I didn't.
When you testified on direct yesterday and you were asked about leaving the kennels with your new story in light of the evidence that's been presented in this trial, your words were, "I got out of there," correct?
I believe that's what I said. Yes, sir.
And you also said during your testimony on cross-examination that you hurt the ones you love the most, didn't you?
I did say that.
Thank you. Nothing further.
In saying that, Mr. Waters, I just want to explain that answer. I mean, he just asked me a question about what I said, and then I was going to explain why I said it.
All right.
As I told you earlier, you're implying to this jury and to me that was me talking about hurting Maggie and Paul. And that's not what that was. What that was is me saying, I know I hurt my brother, my partners, my clients, many of whom I told you I loved, all of whom I cared for. And that's what that was when I'm talking about how my misdeeds, how I hurt the people worst were the ones I loved the most.
I just asked you what you said, correct, Mr. Murdaugh?
You did ask me what I said, but in asking me that, you're putting an implication on there that I am explaining.
I just asked you what you said.
Okay, yes, sir.
Thank you. Nothing further.
I'll stand for a moment while council approach.
No, it's not going to be another 6 hour. Once we're done with this, I'm going to give some highlights about the first 2 people that were called today by the defense. Yeah, it was bad. And then we're going to watch John Marvin. As you see, the defense had this wise idea to call in their own forensic expert. And the forensic expert that they called in, the stuff that they said did not match up at all with the actual autopsy or pictures or anything that was found at the site. And they paid him $5,000 to be there. Yeah, they paid a witness to testify. And they admitted it on the stand. So. That was a thing.
Seated, please. Well, we've come to the end of this week, and we will adjourn now and resume at 9:30 Monday morning. Have a great weekend. Do not discuss the case or
Hi, Reaper.
allow yourself to be exposed to any information concerning the case. And we'll see you Monday morning. Have a great weekend. Jury's excused.
Okay, so when it comes to paying for someone to testify, because he was a forensic expert, he would be known as a fact witness. A fact witness can be paid by lawyers and litigants for time spent testifying, preparing to testify, or assisting with the litigation. Now, if you're a regular person and not an expert witness, if you are not getting paid for a professional fact, you are just giving your opinion, then no, you can't pay them. It's very specific. But I will also say that their fact witness isn't exactly good at the facts, because he completely ignored that there was, sorry, this is going to be kind of graphic. There was Paul's hair on top of the door and in the door. And he was trying to say that he was shot from above and that his brain came out the entry wound. And you could tell it came from the top. Yeah, the door he was standing in front of. Because he was over by the feed room. That has a door that goes to the outside. Yeah. So, yeah. We're jumping ahead to John Marvin.
If you bring the jury. Very good, thank you. Madam Floor Lady, how's the jury?
They're doing okay.
Very good, thank you. Your next witness.
Your Honor, defense calls John Marvin Murdaugh.
Place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You'll have a seat on the stand. Just that microphone.
John Marvin Murdaugh, Murdaugh.
Mr. Murdaugh, will you tell the jury just briefly some background information? Where are you from? What do you do?
Yes, sir. So I was born in Columbia, grew up in Hampton, attended public schools from first grade through high school, graduated Wade Hampton, went to the University of South Carolina, got a degree in criminal justice, and I'm now self-employed. I've opened some companies in the heavy equipment business.
What's the name of your company?
Well, the main company is Murdaugh Rental Center, but I've got Murdaugh Kubota, Murdaugh Equipment LLC. So generally speaking, I'm in the construction.
He has all of these companies. Never really seemed to have anyone there.
Equipment, agricultural tractors and implements. I'm in the equipment business.
And do you have offices? Locations, multiple locations?
I have two, one in Hampton and one in Okeechobee, Bluffton area.
Are you related to the defendant, Richard Alexander Murdaugh?
I am. I'm his brother.
Do you have any other brothers?
I do. Randy Murdaugh is my brother.
And do you have a sister?
I do. Lynn,
All right.
both are here.
And and your parents are whom?
Randolph and Libby Murdaugh.
Are you the only son of the three that didn't go to law school?
I am, and I'm quite proud of it.
Tell the jury generally about the Murdaugh family, your family in this area.
Well, obviously, we're probably like most families or a lot of families. We're very close. The siblings, we stay in touch. We do holidays together. You try to interact and keep your family core together. We're just, a normal family doing normal family things.
Right. Your parents, and we've heard about your father, Randolph Murdaugh, who died on June the 10th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then your mother's Miss Libby,
She is.
and she's still alive, correct?
She is. In fact, yesterday was her birthday.
And you went by to see her.
I did, with my kids.
The in the spring of 2021, were they both alive? Was your dad alive?
Yes, sir.
And what was his health in the spring of 2021?
Well, for some, he had been battling cancer, and not just cancer. I'll use that term loosely. He had multiple forms of cancer, but he had been battling cancer, had health issues. He had been through heart surgeries. Just overall, his health was not good. Just in and out of hospitals, just
Right.
age and the diseases were catching up to him.
And would you check in on your mom and dad any chance you got?
I would. So I didn't tell you all this, but so I don't live in Hampton. My wife and family and I, we live down in Beaufort or just outside of Beaufort. And so my drive is about an hour's drive to do it. So I didn't visit as often as
Hey, Mary.
Randy and Alec because they were in Hampton. But absolutely, anytime I had the opportunity to work in Hampton at my office, I would always take time to stop by. And then sometimes I would just wanted to go see my mom.
And was it routine for one? So either your brothers who lived in Hampton to stop by and check on them routinely?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I don't know every time they went because I wasn't there, but I feel confident that they visited more just because of the proximity. It's just an easier visit.
So let's talk about proximity. Your brother Randy, where does he live?
He lives in Hampton, in town.
And then your sister Lynn, where does she live?
She lives in Somerville.
And then Alec, where did he live in the
Um,
spring of 2021?
Well, I think in the spring of 21, he was living in Moselle. I think all of them were.
And is Moselle close to Alameda?
Well, it's further than Randy's house, but much closer than mine.
Right. And is that in your mother's house? I'm saying Alameda.
By the way, his house really wasn't all that far. 13.4 miles. Takes about a few minutes. Not a big deal.
But is Alameda a town? Or
No,
what is
Almeda's correct. That's the location. That's the property name, if you will, the intersection name. I think that's a general.
And just tell Jerry where that's located.
It would be just east of Varnville, maybe 2 or 3 miles outside of the town limits.
Is it basically at the intersection of, I don't know, what's that mean?
Intersection of 278 and Highway 68 that would go to, one goes to Ridgeland and one goes to Yemassee.
Sorry, I just want to give y'all a fun fact. Alameda is actually called a hamlet. It's a hamlet. And Varnville is not a town, it's a village. So Alameda is located right outside the village of Varnville. Alameda has 3 houses in it, so it's a hamlet.
Okay. And would Alec visit your mom and dad frequently in the spring of 2021, to your knowledge?
Oh, absolutely.
We'll get to more of that. I want to talk about Paul. How well did you know Paul?
I knew Paul very well. Excuse me, I'm gonna have a hard time talking about Paul because we had a very special relationship. But I knew him very well, and I'll do my best to answer any questions about him.
Well, did he have a nickname?
He did. They called him Little Rooster.
And did they call him anything else?
Well, I mean, he'd been called Little Rooster, had been called, have you heard, Paw Paw? I mean, that's what my family, my kids called him.
What did you call him?
Well, it depends on where we were and what we were doing. When we were, excuse me, when we were doing something fun in a social event, I would refer to him as Paw Paw. Now, y'all haven't heard this yet, but he worked for me. So when he worked for me, it was Paul, or it was Paul Terry, because I was trying to be, a little more authoritative.
Right. Who else called him Paw Paw?
Most of all the family. And that's not, that's not a name that was said at all times, but when we're having fun, kids would say it. My wife would say it. It was just a name that was used in fun times and in normal times.
And you mentioned Paul worked for you. When did he work for you?
That's, I thought you were going to ask that, and unfortunately I don't know. He's worked for me maybe prior to June of 21. He was working then. I think he worked the 2 summers prior to that. And it was just summer.
Which means that over the summer, to keep him out of trouble, since the boat crash was in February 2019, he was court ordered to go work.
More work. I mean, it would only last a month or so.
It's the way he was allowed to leave the house.
And was he working for you in June of 2021?
He was.
And what was he doing for you?
Anything I asked him to do.
Where was he working?
He was working at my Bluffton Oakety store. He would do anything from power wash equipment or deliver new tractors that were being sold, talk to customers, help customers load and unload rental equipment. He did, as you heard someone testify, that boy would work. And so whatever was asked of him, he would do.
Was he on the phone the whole time, or did he actually work?
Not at work, he was not. Well, not while I was there.
Oh, right. Was he a good worker?
He was an excellent worker.
Did you spend time with Paul? Well, let me back up. Do you have a
Hey,
place
Crow.
where
Hey,
you
you
hunt?
two too.
You have a property?
Yes, they do
I
sound the
do.
same.
Do you have a name for that property?
We call it Greenfield.
And would Paul and Buster come out to Greenfield to hunt?
They would.
Would they?
Absolutely.
Let me just back up. What was the relationship between Alec, Paul, and Buster?
Oh, it was a great relationship. You know, anything that the boys were doing, Alec wanted to do, and the boys always came first to him. And some of y'all may have been on dove hunts before, but we would have I have a very small field, and you know, I've got 10 stands in the field, and before the hunt, I have it organized where I know who's sitting where. Well, I have Alec. He says, well, can the boys come? Well, of course they can come. So now I've got to rearrange for that. Or if they said they were coming and the boys backed out, Alec always backed out. I was thinking about this. To this day, I don't believe he has ever come hunting with me since his boys have been old enough to hunt without his boys. It's always with the boys.
Did you do other things with them?
Yeah, did sporting events, you know, football games, baseball games.
Was he close with his sons?
Very close.
Right. And how about Maggie? What did you observe of his relationship with Maggie?
It was a great relationship. I mean, all marriages, I'm sure, have hiccups here and there, but I'm telling you, it was a good marriage. In coming here, I was trying to think of ways to describe it. My wife and I and Alec and Maggie, we went to a concert together. It was the Darius Rucker concert. And of course, we're sitting in there. Alec and Maggie are sitting just below us. And I had just gone, and I hope I can say this in court, I'd just gone and bought one of those $15 beers. And I was back in my seat, and songs playing, and my wife taps me, and Alec and Maggie are holding hands and swaying together. And she's like, why aren't you holding my hand? And so my $15 beer got put down.
Which has nothing to do with anything.
They had a great relationship. I mean, that's just one of many. Football games, they would put out a tailgate spread. They would welcome the kids, family, friends. It was just a wonderful.
And did they do a lot of family things together with Paul and Buster and Paul and Buster's friends?
Yes, they did. You know, I knew of trips that they would take, family trips, you know, vacations. They had a house at Edisto that y'all have heard about, and they would have, you know, they would always have friends come over, particularly the boys' friends.
There's been some discussion during this trial about Paul leaving guns and stuff around. Did you ever experience that?
I did.
And tell the jury a little bit about your experience.
Well, you know, I've heard the testimony about it, and it's accurate. I mean, I could tell you all 100 stories of him leaving things, but he was notorious. He would come stay with us at our house. He would leave. Liz would have all of his clothes washed, and you know, he just left and didn't care about where his clothes were. In fact, Paul came duck hunting with me one time, and at Greenfield, and I smile fondly on this when I think back on all this. So we had a great duck hunt. I think there were 3 of us in the blind. Great duck hunt. We picked up all the birds, decoys, and we left, and we go back up and have a nice breakfast. You're doing all the post hunt, all the fun things that you do. Well, I went back hunting. I don't know, it was probably a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks later, and his hunting gear is still in the blind. I mean, I had to smile when I saw it. I was like, that's Paul.
Right. I want to ask you a little bit about riding property. I mean, you ride your property down at Greenfield,
I do.
and if you
But riding in what,
like checking on the property, do you?
oh, you mean like just riding around, joy riding or checking feeders or?
Right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And do you always carry a gun when you're doing that?
I don't.
And have you ridden property like at your dad's place with your dad and maybe Alec or others? I mean, is
Right.
that a
Well,
frequent occurrence?
I would say almost never when I rode the property with my dad.
Almost never carry guns.
Almost never would we carry a gun. We would just enjoy right now. If it were late in the afternoon and we were considering maybe getting in a deer stand, at the last minute, possibly. But typically with my dad and us, we didn't carry a gun then.
Right. Speaking of your dad, what was, you recall what was going on with his health the weekend, the Saturday, Sunday, before June the 7th? So I guess would start, Friday would be the 4th, Saturday would be the 5th, Sunday would be the 6th.
Right. So he was actually in the hospital, I believe in Columbia that weekend. And I think he got out of the hospital on Sunday.
Okay. And did you pick him up? Your brother picked him up? You know who picked him up?
I did not. I didn't. I may have been out of town. I can't recall. I've heard the testimony about it. I did not pick him up.
Did
Remember, he cannot recall where he was that weekend, but he had texted the group chat about everyone going to see Dad that weekend. And they told reporters and stuff first that his dad had been at the hospital in Savannah. They said nothing about the hospital in Columbia.
Did you end up taking your father to the doctor on that Monday, June the 7th?
I did.
And where did you take him?
I took him to Savannah,
And
to his, what I would call his normal doctor. I think Columbia was maybe he had to go up there for some different things or another. I'm not sure.
and was he having some breathing issues on
He was
that
having
Monday?
major breathing issues.
And when you went to the doctor on Monday, June the 7th, was there a decision made to admit him to the hospital?
It was. So when I took him, we were only going to a doctor's appointment. We were not going to the hospital. It was just me taking him to a doctor's appointment to try to find out what the breathing issues were, maybe, some type of a treatment or medication or something to help him. While we were there, not as soon as the doctor saw him, but when the doctor saw him and went through some things, he immediately told both of us that he had to be in the hospital, that he was not getting the oxygen that he needed.
And when was he admitted on that Monday?
He was.
And what was, as you understood it, the prognosis when he was put back in the hospital on Monday, the 7th?
On Monday, the 7th. Yes. So my understanding was the doctor that we were seeing, or that he was seeing, had some really strong beliefs that the cancer that he had was not causing the breathing obstructions, that it very likely could be pneumonia. And he
I
told us,
figured
he
you were
said, if
still
it's the
here and I love you,
cancer,
Fit.
that's the worst. But if it's pneumonia, like I think it is, I think we've got some treatment options.
So what was there hope on June the 7th?
Absolutely. When he told me that, well, first of all, when he said he had to go into hospital, it scared me. Obviously it scares you when a doctor tells you immediately have to check in. But yes, him explaining that he was optimistic that it was going to be pneumonia and that there would be a breathing treatment to help it. I felt pretty good.
Now, in evidence, and I'm not going to read it again, but did you and your brother send out text messages to family members giving them
We did.
And that was on the 7th.
That was on the 7th.
And in the update, did you explain the doctor believed it was pneumonia?
Yes, I gave a basic summary of what I was told by the doctor, what I believed it to be. I think Randy and I had a few minutes to talk, and he typed up another email just to make sure that everybody was in the loop.
Okay. And
I'm sorry, not an email, a text message.
text
I'm
message.
sorry.
And did the diagnosis and the prognosis subsequently change on your
Well,
dad?
it did. It did.
When was that?
Well, so on Tuesday afternoon, we're back out at we're back at Moselle. And, you know, we still hadn't heard much. I mean, all this other stuff going on, it just, as you can imagine, it's just so much going on. Randy called me and told me they had done everything that they could do and that he would be coming home in an ambulance under hospice care.
And did he die on June the 10th?
He died, I think, 2 days later.
Take your time.
That's all right. That's all right.
Going back to taking your dad to the doctor and then checking him in the hospital, there's some vehicles being switched around a little bit, and we get to, you know, that. But can you explain the jury how all that transportation went to get to your dad to the hospital, doctor?
You talking about on that Monday for me to get him?
On June the 7th.
It's a little bit complicated, but I'll do my best to explain it. So Randy, on Monday morning, Dad had been in the hospital Sunday, got out Sunday, knew that he needed to be seen by his regular doctor, but did not have an appointment. And so Randy was doing everything he could to get him in as early as he could on that Monday, and just asked me, he says, if I get the appointment, can you take him? And I said, absolutely, I'd be delighted to. A little while later, an hour or two, I don't know, it was still that morning, Randy calls me and says, okay, they have an opening for him, but he has to get there right away. So Hampton is an hour and a half from Savannah, hour and a half. He said, you don't have time to drive to Hampton to get him. I will meet you in Ridgeland about halfway, which is not far from my house. And then you just take him and I'll go back. He had some time sensitive things to work on. So we met at Palmetto Co-op in Ridgeland. I got in my mom's car with my dad. Randy got in my truck and drove it back to Alameda where Randy had come to pick up my dad. So Randy's truck's back at mom and dad's house. So I drive dad to Savannah in my mom's car, go through what we just talked about, the doctor's appointment, getting checked in. And back then COVID was still going on and there were several restrictions. They wouldn't let me go back with my dad at that time. So I was going to be driving home and now I'm stuck in my mom's car. So I knew Paul was working and I guess it was around 5 or so. And that's when we closed. I called Paul and said, Paul, listen, I need you to, if you would, drive my mom's car back to Alameda, pick up my truck and bring it to work the next morning. And then just leave he was driving like a farm truck that day. I said, leave it and I'll drive it and we'll just swap back the next morning. And so that's how our cars got swapped.
All right. So when you got back on the evening of the 7th, did you see Paul?
I did.
And where did you see him?
At my house.
And he got into your mom's.
Got into my mom's
sedan
car.
And drove
right.
to Alameda.
And drove it to Alameda and then got in my truck and drove it to Moselle.
Okay. And you said the farm truck was at your house. Do you remember where Paul's truck was?
Paul's normal truck was in the shop being worked on.
Was that Jimmy Butler's?
It was a shop in Varnville, Jimmy Butler's, yes, sir.
Now, when you last saw Paul, was he just as normal as you see him every day, or was?
Oh, absolutely. He was playing with my kids in the yard, waiting on me to get there. In fact, that particular day, he was pretty dirty. So whatever he had been doing back at work had him pretty dirty, but he was playing with the kids in the yard, being Paul.
Is that the last time you saw him?
That is the last time I saw him.
When did you learn that, and how did you learn that Maggie and Paul were murdered on the night of June the 7th?
Well, Alec called me. And Liz and I, we have 3 younger kids. I mean, our youngest is 8 now, so it would have been 6 at the time. And so we don't have a lot of free time to ourselves. But that night we were watching television. And
Well, let me back up. Had Alec called you earlier in the night when he was on his way to?
oh, yes, sir.
His mom's?
Yes, sir.
And we got phone records of that. What do you recall of that conversation?
He called, just checking on me, just said, I saw the news about Dad. Things look good. It was a brief conversation, and I hate to say it, but I kind of said, listen, man, I finally have a few minutes. Can we talk tomorrow?
So the phone conversation that he had with Alex on the way to Alameda, they're pretty much using to try and establish that everything was fine. That Alex was calm, cool, and collected and didn't kill them. They're talking about other things.
And we're watching a movie,
And what was his demeanor when you spoke with him on the evening of the 7th?
same as always, just normal.
And then later on that night, you got another phone call from him?
And I got when you asked the question, how did I learn? Yes, Alec called me and just absolutely hysterical. As soon as I heard his voice, I knew something bad was going on. Didn't know what. And I'm in my pajamas. He said, something bad has really happened. I don't know what his exact words, but I think he said, Maggie and Paul have been hurt really badly. Please get here as fast as you can. And, I drop what I'm doing and I go get dressed and I'm hurrying. I'm, just so many things are going through your mind. You don't know what to do. So I get dressed and I run outside and realize I don't have a car. Paul's car's out there and it is a hunk of junk. And I mean,
This was the farm truck.
this was a farm truck. And so I knew I couldn't take my wife's car because she was taking the kids to school. And at this point, I knew something bad. I just didn't know how bad it was.
All the unnecessary information. So what happened when he called? Well, he told me to get down there as fast as possible. He was really freaked out. He was crying. So I went to go leave but couldn't, as I didn't have a vehicle to go. Or you could have just said, he wanted me to come over, but I could not, as I did not have a vehicle at the time. And explain how he sounded on the phone. And yes, it is gish galloping. It's a fun word.
So did you then get in the farm truck and head to Moselle?
I did.
And what happened along the way?
Well, so along the way, I'd spoken to Randy. He asked me to try to get in touch with a close family friend and one of their law partners, Danny Henderson. I was just constantly trying to call him. I'm driving fast. I'm trying to get to Moselle. And, once I got Danny and told him that he needed to get up there, I had just a few minutes to myself and I was crying. And somebody called me shortly after that. I don't know who it was. I can't remember, but I remember it was either Alec or Randy, I believe. And they said the sheets were being pulled over them.
Did the farm truck break down?
It did.
How'd you end up getting to Moselle?
Well, so let me back up and tell you. So the route that from my house down in Okatee, Beaufort, takes me to Coosawhatchee, and I get on 95 to go to Yemassee and getting off and coming up that way. Well, another close family friend, his name is Greg Alexander. He is the chief of police in Yemassee. I reach out to him and I just say, Greg, I gave him said something bad had happened. Or again, I don't know when I was told about the sheets, but I told him, I said, listen, something bad's happened. We got to get up there. When I get to Yemassee, can you please help make sure I get to Moselle because this truck's sputtering and I knew it wasn't good. And he met me at Yemassee and he fell in behind me and we started driving until he found.
So he called up his buddy, who happens to be the chief of police in the 14th Judicial Circuit, told him something bad happened over at Alex's. Because, people over at that solicitor's office in Hampton, right by him, they're going to know Paul. They're going to know about the boat stuff. So if you get your dudes to go over there. Didn't remember when they said anything about the sheets. Alex was on the phone with Randy when they pulled the sheets over them. It's in the phone record.
Finally passed me in Varnville and well, go ahead.
And did he end up driving you the rest of the way?
Well, he did. So he passed me shortly before Varnville. He took a right on 63 and he was a little ways ahead of me when the truck quit on me. I called him and said, Greg, I said, come back and get me. The truck has broken down. And of course he picked me up and took me straight on to Moselle.
Were there any guns in the farm truck that Paul had left when you got in it?
I have no idea. It was dark when I got in it. As y'all can imagine, I was frantic. I jumped in it and I took off.
Did you ever see any guns in it?
That night, never. I mean, I didn't look. I mean, it just,
Right.
I wasn't looking in the backseat. I wasn't worried about anything except getting to Moselle.
Okay. Do you remember about the time you got to Moselle? What time was it roughly? Or better yet, who was there when you got there?
Well, there were, I mean, well before I got to Moselle or we got to Moselle, you could see the lights flashing. It was just, there were tons of people. Mostly what I would describe as first responders of some sort.
And when you pulled up, where did you go?
So we came in the main gate and came around and they had created a small crime scene. And when we pulled up, I saw Alec and I think before Greg even stopped the car, I jumped out and ran to him.
And what was his condition, Alex?
Oh, he was just broken. I mean, distraught. I mean, everybody was. There were a few other people there, but he just, all we did is hugged and cried. I mean, I don't even know that we talked.
How long did you stay down adjacent to the crime scene? Do you recall?
Quite some time. I have to assume that I probably was there at the 11 o'clock-ish. I don't know what time I got there, but I don't think we went back up to the house, until well after midnight, maybe 2, 3.
And when you went to the house, do you recall if any SLED agents came up there?
Well, I did not see any. I heard some testimony, some came and got some clothes, but I did not see any SLED agents at the house. The last officer that I remember seeing that night, or officers, were the ones that told us that we needed to leave that area, that they were going to be doing stuff with the bodies, and that we needed to go to the house.
Right. When you went into the house, were there other people in there when you got in?
There were. Most people that I knew, some of Alec's partners, Randy's partners, family members, Lynn.
Was there food out or had food? What was it? Had anything?
Well, I didn't see any food, but I saw pots and pans and I saw folks that were cleaning up. They were removing pots and pans, but I never opened it and looked in it. So I presumed that it was food. They cleaned dishes. They put the pots and pans away or in the refrigerator.
Which is really odd. Because, the SLED agents are arriving. It's really late at night. The only other people that have been called to the house, besides you, are law partners Randy, who's also a law partner, Buster, Dick. Yeah. Who's cleaning pots and putting them away? Why aren't you comforting your friend and law partner?
Was a TV on in the house? Do you remember?
You know, based on what I know, I would say it is, but I can't tell you 100% that it was on, but I'd be willing to bet it was.
What do you mean when you say based on what you know?
Well, I don't think I'd ever been in that house without the TV being on if Alec and Maggie were there.
After, well, did you ultimately go to Alameda that evening with Alec, Buster, and his girlfriend, Brooklyn?
We did.
Do you remember what Alec was wearing when he went to Alameda?
Not precise. I mean, I can't, he was wearing shorts and a t-shirt. I can't tell you details, but it was shorts and a t-shirt, you know, like relaxed shorts.
Do you know whether he had had a shower or not?
It appeared he had. I mean, his hair was not, yeah, I didn't see him in the shower, but I can tell you, I think he had a shower.
I understand. So then let's move forward to the morning of the June 8th. I guess, did you get any sleep the night of June the 7th?
Very little. I don't know that I fell asleep. I've certainly laid in the bed. It just, as you can imagine, just the thoughts and things. I don't know if I slept. When I got up and started moving the next day, I certainly didn't feel like I'd slept.
What did you do the next day when you got up?
You talking about precisely or generally?
Just generally.
I got up and Alec was up. I don't think Buster and Buckman were. I told Alec that I was going over to Greenfield. My farm that I told you all about is 2 or 3 miles away, so it's very close. And
Pro tip, if your answer to the question, what did you do that day, is not really well rehearsed, then all you have to do is give the basics and they'll ask you questions if they need more information.
I have all, you know, plenty of clothes over there. So I told him I was going over there to shower and put on fresh clothes and that I would meet him at Moselle.
And did you go to Moselle?
I did after I left Greenfield. Yes, sir.
And you remember who was there when you got to Moselle?
I was the first one there.
And what'd you do?
I just went to stay there until I knew Buster, Brooklyn, and Alec were coming. I suspected that other family members and partners, I knew others were coming. So I just kind of sat there just, you know, just in disbelief still. It's just, you know, moments of just.
Was the door to the house unlocked? Do you remember?
You know, that's a good question. I thought about it. I don't remember. It either was unlocked or I had the code because there's a keypad on a side door, but I can't tell you which door I went in. I don't know.
Did you eventually go down to the kennels?
I did. You know, once everyone got there, there was, you know, a fair amount of activity in the house with family and law partners.
I just want to remind y'all real quick that besides Blanca, the housekeeper, John Marvin, the brother that only has a degree in criminal justice, didn't go to law school, owns a rental company. Well-known, not lawyer. They were at the house first. Yeah.
Alec's law partners, Randy's law partners. You know, I just felt like I needed to go down. I needed to see for myself what had gone on and just, you know, just kind of take it in. I mean, just maybe for some type of understanding.
How long did you stay down there at the kennels?
Well, I can't, I don't know. But I will say this, before I went, I was unsure whether I was allowed to go because I knew it was a crime scene. And so I reached out to a friend of mine in law enforcement and said, listen, I don't know who's handling the crime scene. I don't know whatever. He said, well, I'll find out and make sure that it's clear for you to go. And he said, don't go until I tell you. And
Instead of approaching the SLED agents that were at the house, that he could have just asked, he called up his buddy in law enforcement.
called me back a few minutes later and said he had spoken to, I believe it was Captain Ryan Neal, and had given the okay that everything was released and it was okay to go there.
And was it cleaned up?
No, Jim, it was not cleaned up.
Were there skull fragments?
Yeah, so, excuse me, this is going to be really difficult. So I could easily see where Maggie had been. I saw the night before where the sheets were, and somebody had told me that who was who. And so I could see where Maggie had been, and it was grass, and, they had covered it up with dirt. So there really was nothing to see where Maggie was. I walked over to the feed room, and y'all have heard the descriptions. Y'all saw it. I've never seen pictures, and I've told them before coming to this court that I was not going to see pictures. But y'all can imagine what I experienced. It had not been cleaned up. I saw blood. I saw brains. I saw pieces of skull. And when I say brains, it could just be tissue. I don't know what I was seeing. It was terrible. And for some reason, I thought it was something that I needed to do for Paul to clean it up. Felt like it was the right thing to do. I felt like I owed him, and I started cleaning. And I can promise you, no mother or father or aunt or uncle should ever have to see and do what I did that day. I don't know. I'm not blaming anybody, but it's just, I was just overwhelmed. I did everything I could, and I would have moments where I would stop crying for a moment, and just in disbelief. At one point, I called my brother Randy and told him what I was doing, trying to describe what I was doing, and he immediately told me to stop doing it. It was not good for me. It was not healthy for me to be there. And I couldn't stop. I had to do it for Paul. That's just what I had to do. And I don't know, it's probably.
John Marvin Murdaugh just admitted that without consulting SLED, who was in charge of the investigation at this point, he called up one of his buddies in law enforcement for the 14th Judicial Circuit, allegedly got told that the crime scene was clear. The cleanup crew hadn't even come yet. And he started cleaning. If a very specific agency is in charge of something pertaining to an investigation, you need to consult them first. Always. But yes, he just admitted that on the stand.
15, 20 minutes later, Mark Ball shows up. Y'all heard Mark Ball testify. And he came and hugged me and told me it was okay to leave. Okay to leave what was left of Paul. They would clean it up. It's the hardest thing I've ever been through in my life.
Yes, sir. What'd you do next?
Mark basically got me. I'm sure I was just a basket case, but he got me back to the house and, got me back around family and, just got back to, the support of others that were there. And there were a lot of people at the house at that point.
Do you remember when you got back to the house at some point in time, people raising questions or bringing up the fact that Maggie's phone had not been located?
Yeah, so that were, particular the lawyers, they were all, being lawyers, they were, questioning things amongst themselves and, how could this happen, trying to figure things out. But it was brought to my attention that Maggie's phone was not there and that law enforcement had not found it. And I can't say that, in fact, I can probably say that I didn't think of it because I'm not a big phone user or a big app user or whatnot. But somebody brought to my attention and says, listen, if Buster or Alec, if they have an app on their phone, like find my phone or find my friends or an app like that, they said you very likely can find out where the phone is if the battery's not dead. And so I went to Buster and sure enough, I said, Buster, do you have this one of these apps like they're talking about? And he said, yeah, sure I do. I said, well, open it up. He opened it up and he handed me the phone and I see Maggie's name and I press it where, to activate it. And it pings Maggie's phone just out front of the property. And I was like, I hate to say it, but I said, holy shit, there it is. And I said, Buster, I'm taking your phone. I'm gonna go back down to the shed and show it to law enforcement.
There is a picture that was published in papers of John Marvin Murdaugh at Moselle with law enforcement from the 14th Solicitor's Office and the 14th Judicial Circuit Solicitor himself, all standing around looking at a phone. He claims in interviews that picture was taken when he was showing SLED Buster's phone using the Find My Phone thing, except he didn't say it was Buster's phone. It was his phone. Now it's Buster's phone. And now he had to go talk to the 14th Judicial Circuit people first and then go to SLED. You and Buster could have just gone over to the agents and been like, hey, why don't we see if we have it? My guy.
And who did you approach first about the phone?
Well, I don't know who it was. Presumably it was SLED agents because keep in mind, I didn't know any of these guys with SLED. I mean, there were a couple of faces that I'd seen before, but I don't know these guys. I've come to know them, but I don't know them or didn't know them then. So I went up to a SLED agent or two SLED agents and said, presumably SLED agents, and said, hey, I've got Buster's phone here and it's got an app on it that can find the phone and it's showing Maggie's phone's right out here. Y'all want to let's go get it. And he said, no need. We have technology coming later today that we should be able to find it. And it blew me away that I'm sitting here showing them where Maggie's phone is, but they won't take the time to walk with me or take this phone itself. I mean, I'd give them the phone to go find it. So,
Reason being, the technology that they need generally also includes all of the stuff that they have to do to measure where the phone was found to where she was murdered, distance and everything. And then they're going to want to get the information off of it. They're not going to want to use it too much or move it too much because it will register those movements. So it's best to just leave it until the investigators need it.
I walk over, I knew Duffy Stone. He was the solicitor. I knew one of his investigators. I walked over to them, said the exact same thing, and they immediately said, absolutely, let's go find this thing before the battery goes dead.
So instead of listening to SLED, he gets the solicitor that his family approved of to go find it.
And what happened?
that we did that.
And
Well,
where-
we started walking down the back entrance or the kennel entrance, if you will. And as we were, and at that time, the agent was holding the phone. I'm looking at it with him. And when it pings, it creates a dot or location. And that dot jumped from right at the end of that road down the road, I don't know, maybe a half a mile, 3/4 of a mile. And so we walked back, got into a car and drove down to where it was showing the phone.
And was the phone?
And I rode with those agents, the solicitor's office agents.
Was the phone ultimately located on the side of the
Oh,
road?
absolutely. We found it in a matter of minutes.
Okay. Do you remember how it was collected? I mean, were you present when it was collected?
I was. So I was on there's a cow pasture on one side and it's wooded on the other side. And I was on the side that the cow pasture's on, if you will. And I heard him say, "I got it." And so, of course, I walked back beside his car and I'm good ways from it, but I see him over there. And I think he took either some ribbon or some flagging or flagging tape and marked the phone. And I don't think he touched it. I think he left it right where it was, called SLED. And maybe at that time, maybe they had been communicating, but SLED had blocked off the road at this point, and one of the agents came up and picked the phone up. And I don't know which agent. Again, I didn't know him.
Don't do that. Don't do that. If you have information for an officer, especially a SLED agent, and they're just like, give it a few hours, do it then. Let them do it then. Don't impede an investigation.
Did any law enforcement officer ask you if you knew the password?
Yes. So once they, and I'll say this, so they did take pictures of it while it was on the ground before they touched it.
Oh, Alibis, SLED is the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. They are the big boy cops that come and investigate like the homicides and stuff.
They picked it up. I think they had gloves on. They picked it up, brought it back to the trunk of the car and opened it up in power zone. And they then asked, what's the password? And of course, I didn't know it.
Did you find out the password?
I did. I called Alec and he gave me the password. I repeated it to the agent. They put the password in and said, "It's open."
So Alec provided you the password that you passed to the agents and it opened the phone? Is that
Yes,
correct?
sir. That's correct.
John Marvin, were you aware of a news release that was issued that morning, Tuesday, June 8th, that the public had no need to be alarmed or concerned for their safety?
Yes, sir.
Well, what was your reaction to that?
I mean, it's quite baffling. It still is. 2 people have been killed and they're telling me that everybody's safe. That tells me that whoever's done this is in jail and they are 100% positive. And because if they're not in jail, nobody's safe.
Right. Did you go back to the residence at Moselle?
And by the way, with that whole news thing, the woman that published it, she did publish a retraction like not that long after. She was like, "Oh shit," and she changed it. She testified about it actually. So
After finding the phone, did you go back up to the house?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did SLED agents come through and search it while you were present?
They did. I don't know how long I'd been back up there, but they came and we kind of talked in the playroom, or I think some have described it as the gun room. Yeah, they talked about that they needed to come in the house and search for things.
And did you escort, I think it was Agent McAllister throughout the house?
Yes, it was Katie McAllister.
And did she tell you what she was looking for?
Initially, she says, well, the way she presented it was, there were so many people in the house. She said, listen, I don't want to just go barging in and make everybody run out of the house, but I'm gonna take my badge off, my gun off, and if you would, just walk me through each room. And, particularly I'm looking for 12-gauge shotgun guns, and 300 blackout and the ammunition for those calibers.
And if you're walking through the house with her, it appeared she was looking for other things besides just guns.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could tell she's looking because she looked in spaces that guns wouldn't fit. So it makes sense that she could be looking for something else.
Such as what?
Well, I don't know.
Well, I understand, but you said spaces. Did she look in the
Well, I mean,
bathrooms and
I
tubs?
opened up up in the upstairs area. There's some cabinets that, a couple of them are pretty small that, she could find ammunition in there, but I don't know how you would get a gun in there.
Did you search bathrooms?
She did. Well, I took her through every room in the house. I mean, every single room.
Did you observe her looking in sinks and toilets and?
So yes, sir. What I observed is like the shower, for example, is, it's a door. It's not an open shower. She opened the door, she looked around and, she was looking at, she easily would have known there was no gun in it when she opened it, but it was obvious that.
Yes, John Marvin Murdaugh is sitting on the stand right now testifying that the SLED agent put down her gun, she took off her badge, she didn't want to freak anyone out. She went to walk through the house on the 8th and look for stuff. Which is weird because the only body cam footage that we have of the 8th from inside of the house is from an agent. And you can see other agents, and everyone has their badge on. Everyone has it. No one's freaking out. You can see Randy in a few shots just standing there, like, staring down the SLED agents and stuff. Whoever that supposed agent was, we don't have her body cam footage. It doesn't exist. But it would if she was investigating in an official capacity.
She was looking a little deeper.
Right. What kind of guns were there at Moselle?
Well, it sounds like the guns of all kinds, rifles, shotguns. I've seen bow and arrows. I've seen crossbows, most anything that you would hunt with.
Right. And were guns mostly in the gun room to your knowledge, when you were over there?
Well, when I went through the house, we identified, I remember one gun in particular that was in the bedroom, a shotgun. I picked it up and said, you need to take this one. And we looked at it and it was a 20 gauge. And she said, no, put that one back. So I put it back. So predominantly all the guns were in the gun room or playroom.
Right. I sort of an aside briefly. Do you hunt with Alec over the years?
I have.
And did he have a go-to gun, to your knowledge, that he would use?
Not to my knowledge.
When's the last time you ever seen him hunt with a 12 gauge?
I'd say that when he bird hunt, he's either shooting a 20 gauge or a 28. There was a time, and please don't ask me when, but I would say it was a few years prior to this that we were turkey hunting on another piece of property down on the Savannah River. And
Drunken Crow, you mean the one that Alex Murdaugh had mentioned before? Because I do believe that that's the one that he claims that he drove back to the house to grab. When he grabbed it, because it was a 12 gauge, he accidentally also grabbed 16 gauge bullets, along with 12 gauge bullets. And he somehow managed to do all of that, get back in his car, and be back at the kennels within 2 minutes.
I know he was hunting with the 12 gauge then, but I don't know whether it was his gun or somebody else.
Yeah, the cops already have that gun. They got that from him when they showed up.
Did that gun have a sticker on it? Do you remember?
It did. And
Do you remember what the sticker said?
no, I don't remember what the sticker said, but I do remember teasing Alec that when you're turkey hunting, you don't want to be seen, and, you know, big sticker on the side of your barrel is kind of like waving a white flag to a turkey.
Did you serve as somewhat of a liaison or the point person with SLED and the family initially?
I don't know that I'd call it a liaison or point person, but I absolutely, I'd become to know Agent David Owens, and I absolutely told David, I said, listen, if you need anything from me or anybody and you can't get in touch with them, you reach out to me. I will either see to it that they call you back. I will see to it that you get the answers that you're looking for, or I will put you in touch with the person you're trying to reach. So I did make myself available.
And did Alec give, to your knowledge, carte blanche to law enforcement to search anywhere that they wish?
Oh, he did. In fact, that before I was going to just do something, you know, I knew that to be the case, but yes, he confirmed it with me. Anything they needed, anytime they needed it.
And you provided consent to search the house the afternoon on the 8th on his behalf, did you not?
I did. And I've consented every time they've ever asked.
We'll get to that. Were you ever asked to provide consent or see if you could obtain consent for any law enforcement to search your mom's house where Alec had been the night before?
Say that to me one more time.
Did any law enforcement ask you to consent or obtain consent so that law enforcement could search Alameda? And I'm talking about on the 8th, because Alec had just been there the night before.
Right.
Did anybody ask you, hey, can we go search Alameda?
No one asked anything.
If asked, would you have obtained consent for law enforcement?
I would have given them consent, and I would have taken them over there just like I did at Alec's house, and I would have helped facilitate the search to show them areas that they may not know about.
Did you remember law enforcement SLED agents coming to your Greenfield property on June the 10th?
Yes, sir, I do.
And what was that about?
I assume they coordinated it with Alec or Randy. You know what? I'm not sure who they coordinated it with, but yes, my understanding is they were coming to interview me, Randy, Alec, Buster. I think that's it, but they wanted to do interviews with all of us.
And did everyone congregate there at Greenfield?
Yes, sir. We were at Greenfield. Of course, you know, that's where we're staying there because of all this. And so it keeps me close to Hampton. So, but yes, we all congregated there.
And when the agents arrived, did they come inside and sit down and talk with each other of you, or how did that work?
No, sir. I offered them to come inside. It was, as you can imagine, it was hot. I said, come in and, you know, offered them a drink of water, whatever, just being polite. And they said, no, you know, we would like to go ahead and start our interviews.
And where did the interviews take place?
In their cars.
And were they all done it simultaneously?
Yes, sir.
And how many SLED agent cars were out there? Do you remember?
Well, there was one for each person they were interviewing, and I would go ahead and guess that there were probably 2 or 3 more.
And not sure that we need to actually play this, but have you been in the courtroom and you've heard this audio tape of Alec being interviewed on that June the 10th, where he states something, either I did him so bad or they did him so bad? Have you heard that?
I have.
And you know Alec's voice?
I know his voice very well.
And what is he saying on that tape?
Crystal clear, they did him so bad. I mean,
And had you heard him say that before his interview that day?
you know, I think I heard him say it either the night of or the day after, but I've also heard him say it many times after.
Well before this trial started or anything?
Well before any of this, that's right. When he was staying and living with us, or between my brother and us.
After Maggie and Paul were murdered on that night of June 7th, were you or other family members with Alec for the most part, for that week and the week after that?
You talking about the days following?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I was. I made a conscious effort to be with him. I mean, as devastating as it was for me, it was 1,000 times worse for him. So I knew as a brother, I needed to be there for him. And I was, of course I didn't sleep with him, but when we were awake, he was, I may not be standing beside him, but we would be in the room together. Or if we needed to go to the gas station, if he wanted dip, I'd ride with him. I just knew I just thought that's what I needed to do.
What was his demeanor that was in the immediate aftermath of these murders?
Oh, Jimmy, that night or days or?
That night, the next day, the day after?
Like I just said, you can use words that he was destroyed. I heard somebody say he was broken. You can use any word you want to use to describe, but I can promise you, words don't do it justice. I would have to create a new word to describe how distraught he was. It's terrible.
And to carry it forward all through the summer, did he, how was he coping afterwards, say?
Hold up. John Marvin just testified about them searching Alameda. They went to Alameda and they did this at Alameda. SLED didn't do anything at Alameda until September 21st, 2021, because they went and got a warrant after Alex had been named an official suspect. And being investigated.
Later June and July and going forward.
It's hard to tell. I thought at times I thought he was doing okay. Other times it would just be sheer grief. I mean, just uncontrollably crying and of course it makes me cry. As y'all can tell, I'm a pretty emotional guy, but we would cry together. And there's no answers. And there's nothing I could say to make it better other than just hugging.
Did he start losing weight?
Oh, yes, sir. Absolutely.
Was he eating, sleeping?
He was pretty heavy going into this.
Right.
And he lost a good bit of weight. I don't know how many pounds, but it became very obvious in a fairly short period of time. He lost weight.
Right. I skipped over something in my outline, and I apologize, but going back on the evening of June 7th, early morning hours, did folks who were there at Alameda raise questions about perhaps the murder? Maggie and Paul were somehow associated with the
You mean at Moselle?
Yeah, the Moselle. Going back to on the evening of June 7th and June 8th, did folks at Moselle raise issues or associate the potential motive for the murder to be related to the boating accident in some form? Well,
I heard it numerous times that night. I heard it at Moselle, and I actually heard it by, Chief Alexander mentioned it. Once I got over the chaotic part of describing what we were doing, why I needed to get to Moselle, he asked me he's driving in front of me, and he asked me, do you think it's related to the boat accident? Of course, Greg, I don't know. I don't know anything about what's happened.
Why would he ask that? Why would that be the first thing that's asked? It wouldn't. Not logically.
Were you were aware of the boating accident and Paul's charges?
Yes, sir.
Weren't you aware? And was there a backlash in the community over that?
Well, it was a lot of backlash. I would not say quite as much in the community, but is on social media and media inflamed rumors is the way I would describe it.
Right.
That it was just totally blown out of proportion. And I don't want to downplay the accident, but what they were saying about the stuff about Paul and Alec, it was just totally inflamed.
Went on the phone with 911. He didn't, he mentioned the threats, they were terrible, all this stuff, but didn't go into detail. When he had the initial talk with law enforcement on June 8th, and he's giving them the rundown of what he did the day before, he brings up the threats again, and he tells law enforcement that it's primarily in person. He's getting attacked, he's getting punched, he's getting assaulted in person because of this. It's not really on social media. It's just person. Then it changes again when he's on the stand to social media and the vile things that they write about him. There's still no paper trail. Both Randy and John Marvin said that they didn't take the threat seriously. Come on.
And you asked about the boating accident. So
Extra
I
info.
told y'all that I called Michael Paul, my friend, to make sure I could go to the crime scene the next morning. Well, Michael Paul is one of my best friends, if not my best friend. I called him that night while we were still down at the crime scene, not because he's in law enforcement, not because of anything, because he's my friend. And I actually told him on the phone, I said, MP is what I said, MP, I don't even know why I called you. I just needed to talk to somebody. And we talked and, cried a little bit after I described. He didn't know what had happened. So I told him and, I cried and you could tell he was upset. But in that conversation, he asked me also, do you think it could be related to the boating accident?
Objection.
Switching gears a little bit, John Marvin, when talking about visiting at your mom's house, mom and dad's house, there's let's talk. Where do you routinely park, or where do you park sometimes when going over to your mom and dad's house?
Me, you asking where I park?
You and others, in the family.
Well, there's a couple of places you can park, depending on who's there, whether there's other cars there. You can either park at what you call the carport, and there's a big dirt area beside it. You can park there, walk up to the side door, or you can pull around to the back corner, park there.
Oh, just a quick reminder that at first he said that he called up someone to see if he could go to the kennels, and they called him back a few minutes later saying that he could on the morning of June 8th when he was there with SLED agents and could have asked them. Now he called them the night before. Thank you.
We all use both spots.
I'm going to pull up and look at it on your screen.
As a matter of fact, I told you it's my mom's birthday. I went there yesterday. I pulled right into the back of the house, but I
Extra
didn't turn
detail.
around. I circled the house. So
Okay.
there's
So I'm gonna pull up States Exhibit 524. It's an evidence, Doug, and go to slide 38. This is the GPS OnStar data. And Doug, if you'll blow up around the house, please, sir. Thank you. Mr. Murdaugh, this is your mom's house, and this is GPS data from
Hey, Arxenium.
night of June the 7th. Do you see that, the red line there?
It's pretty blurry on my screen. I don't know about y'all's.
Well, you'll back it out a little bit, Doug? All right, just. Is that better?
Well, yes, it's still blurry, but I can see.
Where is that in relation to your mom's house?
You're talking about the, right there where the arrow's pointing?
Yes, sir.
That is at the back corner of the house.
Okay.
That would be exactly where I parked yesterday.
All right. And if you'll pull up, Doug, Exhibit 136.
Okay, so they're talking to John Marvin. That is Alex's brother, who is not a lawyer, but does have a degree in criminal justice. And John Marvin's doing the exact same thing, adding extra detail, asking people to repeat their question when he doesn't know how to answer without like thinking about it for a bit. That's great.
And this will be Defendant's Exhibit 136 in evidence. And tell me where that is?
That's same area. That's what I'm talking about.
Is that the same area that we just saw on the last exhibit with the red dots?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Generally speaking, I mean, it's such a wide open area. So when you pull up, you're not like pulling into the exact same spot each time to where you're creating a road or whatnot. It's just a nice grassy area. You pull up, go up to the back door, and you're right there at the back of the house.
And why do you go to the back of the house?
That's when my dad was alive. There's a little breakfast room there with a recliner in it. He was either in that recliner, at the table eating, in the bed, or not at home. I mean, that literally was his.
Right. So Doug, if you pull up Defendant's 135.
So everything's at the back of the house. I
Right.
mean, it's just, they don't use this. It's a large home and they just don't, as old as they are, well, my mom can't get out of bed, but as old as they are, they don't go to the front.
I'm sorry, just skip that. 131, Defendant's 131 in evidence, please. Again, is this sort of the same area photographed from a different direction?
Yes, sir.
Now, what's that structure that we see in the background past that big oak tree?
That was my dad's cookhouse, or man cave, as some people would call it. That's,
Okay.
Yeah.
And how far is that from the house roughly?
I would guess 60 to 80 yards.
Okay. And that's and is it open around there? I mean, from the photo, is that accurate?
Oh, it's absolutely.
Right.
That whole area is a grassy area with oak trees and pecan trees.
So Marvin, I want to go to Labor Day weekend of 2021. Where were you that weekend? Do you remember?
Labor Day weekend 21.
When Alec went to the hospital?
Okay, yeah, yes. So I'd been out west fishing, and I came in on Saturday night.
And did you, prior to Labor Day weekend 2021, were you aware as to whether or not Alec had a opioid addiction?
No, sir.
Did you transport Alec, drive Alec from the hospital in Savannah to a detox facility in Atlanta on that weekend, or?
Well, I believe it would have been on that Monday.
Right.
I was not driving. Randy and I took him. Randy was driving and I was in the back. But yes, sir, we did take him to a detox facility. Day,
I was not driving. Randy and I took him. Randy was driving and I was in the back. But yes, sir, we did take him to a.
See, that's super strange because in the interview that he did in the Island Packet, March 2022, and he was talking about this situation, he said that Alex was in the back because he was able to turn all the way around in his seat and do kicky legs. Like he couldn't stay still.
Detox facility.
And where was the facility located?
Just outside of Atlanta.
Okay. And what was, can you describe for the jury Alex condition, like physical condition in the car?
Yes, sir. So when I met Randy over in Savannah, he had Alec and I got in the car or Randy's truck with him. I'd never seen anything like it. I've seen television shows of talking about the leg twitching and the squirminess, if you will. And that's the first thing I mean, you could just tell he was sweating. He was thrashing about, Jim,
Did he turn
I don't know
around?
how much detail you want me to go into.
Actually, dude, I'm going to need you to clarify dates for me. Because you were out fishing at West, and you came back that Saturday night. You were picked up from the airport by Randy, who already had Alex with him. But he didn't get out of the hospital until Monday the 6th, and the hospital is in Savannah, which means that why would what? It just doesn't make sense.
What, did he turn around in the seat of the car and what was he doing?
Yeah, so maybe halfway there, at one point, he had taken his seatbelt off and he had his head down where your fanny would be in the seat and is trying to stretch his legs and just kind of steady, just like thrashing them and kicking them. It's just, again, I've seen TV, but I've never seen something like this in real life.
And was he able to control himself?
No, sir. I said about detail. So he messed himself. He had diarrhea.
This is the first time anyone has mentioned Alex shitting himself. Thank you.
He just couldn't control it.
And then,
And I say diarrhea, I'm not talking about at a restroom. I'm talking about in the car, in his pants.
okay. And after he spent some time in the facility in Atlanta, did you and your brother go pick him up and take him to another facility in Orlando, Florida?
Yes, sir, we did.
Do you remember that?
Yes, sir, I did.
On the drive to Orlando, do you remember anything happened that stands out to you?
So that drive, he was much different. He was more subdued. It was not the thrashiness, not the twitching, not the jerkiness, if you will. I don't know the words that you would use for that, but that's what I'm saying. The only thing that really stood out for me is he slept a lot of the time, but he woke up from sleeping. And when he woke up, I mean, he jerked forward and you could just tell that, I mean, it was sheer terror. He just woke up out of a horrible, horrible dream. And I believe it was him dreaming about what he found with Paul and Maggie.
Keep going a little further, Mr. Murdaugh. And sometime in September, did SLED actually come and search the house at Alameda?
Yes, sir.
And were you present?
I was.
Okay, were you informed as to what items were seized during that search?
I was informed of one item that was received, seized.
And what item was that?
It was described as a coat.
What kind of coat?
Well, they didn't tell me what kind of coat.
Okay. And and did they tell you where the coat was found?
Yes, sir. So I would assume that the searching of the house, all that was winding down. So Agent David Owens and I believe Randy was outside near us, but he may have been talking to somebody else. I'm not sure. May have been talking to another agent. I'm not sure. But David Owens, or Agent Owens, came up to me and said, we found a coat back on the property. Do you know anything about it? And I said, well, David, I said, if you found it back on the property, I said, it's a large piece of property, some 400 something acres. I said, my dad rides this Kubota side by side. It's probably his. And I said, and if you show it to me, I can try to identify it. And of course, he said he couldn't show it to him or wouldn't show it to me. I'm not sure what it was.
Were you sometime later asked to view a photo of a blue raincoat?
I was. Well, I was asked to view a raincoat and listen to an audio tape.
Of the kennel?
Yes, sir.
Okay. On the blue raincoat, were you informed where it was seized from?
Well, I knew where it was seized from because he had already told me. But I was, this instance, I was told that they wanted us to, or when I say us, they asked Randy, Lynn, and I to go view the coat and the tape. At this point, I knew where it had been recovered, but they said, we want you to view a coat that had been recovered out of a closet.
And was that different from what you were led to believe when you
Oh, absolutely.
had you ever, did they ever anybody provide an explanation about why you were giving two different locations where the coat was found?
To this day, no one's told me that.
The photo of the coat that they showed you, had you ever seen that raincoat before?
No, sir.
Was it the blue raincoat that?
Well, it certainly looks.
Okay, to answer this, yes. The generic one definitely is the most mocked. Also, the coat in question was found in September 2021 after a search warrant had been executed on Almeda. Alex Murdaugh knew that he was a suspect in the death or murder of his wife and son August 11th, 2021, when he had a SLED interview that we've seen the tape of multiple times over. But if they had asked for his consent, he would have given it to him to go into Almeda.
Similar to the one, I saw a picture. I didn't see the coat itself, but it certainly looked to be similar or the same.
Had you ever seen it before?
No, sir.
Did you recognize what closet it came out of from photos during this trial?
Well, I saw that. And I think I know what closet they're referring to.
Well,
There's only two.
let me ask you,
I'm sorry.
The closet as you go up on the first flight of stairs before you go at the landing right there. It's what's kept there?
Clothing, not everyday clothing that's more or less in storage. Junk.
Right.
You know, it's not a club. It's not a club. First of all, my dad wouldn't climb stairs even if he could, but he couldn't.
Right. There's some testimony that there's GSR on that raincoat. Got any idea how there could be GSR on clothing in your dad's closet at Almeda?
Objection.
No, I
Sustained.
Did your dad carry guns around with him?
No, not in the sense that you're saying. So he was not like Paul that always had guns with him. You know, he would keep a gun if he went dove hunting, for example, and he went on one dove hunt, that gun may ride with him for 2 months. He just would stay. He just would. Same with golf clubs. If he went back when he would play golf, he just
During,
there's a bunch of junk in his truck.
during hunting season, was there normally a gun in the back seat?
During hunting season, I would say that there usually would be.
And did he
In
have,
fact, during hunting season, because he always loved to go on a bird hunt.
and did he have a specific gun that he used frequently?
Oh, he had one gun.
And did that gun have a name?
It did. It was called Bo Whoop.
And did he clean it often?
I've never seen him clean it. He got that gun in 1957 for his high school graduation, and he used it for every game that he chased. But I'm sure it got cleaned somewhere along the way, but I'd never seen him clean it, and I still haven't seen him clean it.
Got it.
I don't know how the thing still works.
Along the way, have you been receiving updates from SLED on their investigation in the Maggie and Paul's murder?
Usually when I call, I would call Agent Owens and ask for updates, and he would try to provide some updates. It almost always seemed like there was stuff that he really, I don't know. I don't know whether he didn't know or just it wasn't at liberty to say at the time. I'm not sure, but yeah, I think he would try to give updates as best as possible.
And you provided information on evidence that they had against your brother.
I have been, yes, sir.
Has
Some of it.
and some of the information that you've been provided turn out not to be accurate information.
Yes, sir.
What type information?
Well, I was told at one point that there was a T-shirt that he was wearing. And can I back up and tell you how we got into this conversation?
Sure.
So I'm having a meeting with SLED.
Yes, sir. Nature of the drug.
Call for your sir.
Statement of an opponent, Your Honor, agent of. It's a statement of a party opponent.
Party opponent.
Agent of the party opponent. It's a SLED
Agent
agent.
of the
Yes, sir.
party opponent.
Yes, sir.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have you take a break now. Please do not discuss the case.
So yeah, John Marvin's dumb. I kind of feel like he put that whole thing in about Alex shitting himself because he knew that Alex couldn't fight it. That's great. But he's still garbage. He's a garbage person.
All right, everybody be seated. Hear this objection again.
Stays objecting, calls for hearsay.
All right, in your response to the Mr.
Yes, Your Honor.
Just a moment, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Conrad's response to Mr. Griffin.
Your Honor, I think his argument was it's an admission by a party opponent. I don't think we're talking about.
Party opponent.
Right, and the subsection 801D2, I think is what we're referencing. And it talks about admission by a party opponent. It doesn't necessarily talk about the statement. And I think what we're getting into are some statements by particular law enforcement officers who've already been on the stand. And I don't think those are admissions to any issue that's
relevance in this case.
Mr. Griffin?
Your Honor, they're directly relevant. The statements relate to evidence that they've told the family they have against Mr.
You said
Murdaugh.
directly relevant?
Yes, sir.
So the objection not based on relevance.
Well, I thought that's what, so a statement of a party opponent is non-hearsay under the definition of hearsay. Your Honor, it's,
Yes, sad tan and beige clothes are really big here.
I don't have the rule in front of me, but under,
The state of South Carolina is a party opponent in
Yes.
this case?
and SLED is the investigative agency. Yes, sir. If otherwise, the rule would not apply in a criminal case. I mean, it has to be the investigative agency. I'm not asking for Colleton County statements or it's the,
No, you've gotten those in already, newspaper statements, Colleton County's call to the newspaper or whatever.
yes, sir.
What else, Mr. Conrad?
I'd also object for the relevance as well, Your Honor, because the state has not offered the shirt and evidence, and the defense is attempting to kind of backdoor here, and it simply doesn't go to any issue, anything that's issued in this
He's
trial.
already testified to the shirt.
Well, sure, but he's trying to get evidence, and maybe we need to proffer it to see exactly what he would say, but my assumption was that he was going to start talking about a report by Mr. Bevel, which we talked about several times in this case. And I'd object to the relevance and to, particularly with Mr. Murdaugh bringing it up.
All right. Well, tell me again what you're asking the witness,
Yeah,
or
yes,
proffer it to the witness. Yes.
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 So, Mr. Murdaugh, what information were you provided by, was it a SLED agent that provided you the information?
Yes, sir.
You were asking him about Agent Owens. He's a SLED agent. Yes.
And what information were you provided that leading up to this that turns out to be inaccurate?
Right, and it was okay for me to speak for you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So what I was asking, I was saying, I wanted to back up to get to where I was getting this information. So I'd been called to SLED, not headquarters, but their office in Waldeboro to view the blue coat and to listen to an audio. After my interview with them, Captain Ryan Neal, I believe we were in his office, is the one that, and I'm going to use my terminology here, but described the white T-shirt covered in blood, even went so far as to describe that Alec took the bottom of it and wiped his face with it, and that's how they knew he was involved. That's how they knew he was there. And I don't know where the question goes after
Can I
that.
answer your question, or are you trying to dig more out of him?
That's it.
All right, and what's your objection?
I renew my objection to the relevance. Nothing has been put, this jury hasn't heard any evidence about any blood being on this T-shirt. And the state has not offered any reports to suggest as such.
We're going to take 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Maybe
John Marvin's dumb. He's really dumb. Really, really dumb. I will be right back. I'm just gonna let this sit for a minute. Enjoy the silence. Enjoy a break. If y'all leave, I understand. But yeah. Hold on.
You bring the jury.
Jury is present, sir.
All right, thank you. The objection is overruled.
Thank you, Mr. Murdaugh. When we broke, the question on the table was about a conversation that you had with a SLED agent regarding some matter of evidence. Can you provide your answer, please, sir?
Yes, so as I was about to say, what led me to this conversation was is SLED asked my brother, my sister, and I to come over to identify or attempt to identify a coat and a recording. And we did that. And so I did my interview with them. And then after the interview, we went into Captain Ryan Neal's, I think he's captain, but Agent Ryan Neal's office at the same SLED office. And in that office, or in his office, we were all in there. They made reference to the shirt that they said Alec was wearing. They told us that it was covered in blood. They went so far as to tell me on the police body cam that he takes his shirt and wipes his face.
Okay, so the shirt isn't evidence, but the shirt being covered in blood was never talked about. Ever. That's something he added. So it would have to be something they would have to confirm. They would have to do this, that, and the other to make sure it could be an evidence in the trial.
Case, and that's how they knew that Alec was at the scene, that he was the one.
So Marvin, just finishing up, what was Alec's relationship with Maggie and Paul's parents? Grandma and Papa T, as we've heard.
Grandma and Papa T, that's great. They had a great relationship. Alec and Papa T played golf together regularly. I mean, it's just a really good father-in-law, son-in-law relationship, and mother-in-law.
And have you,
They would travel together, vacation together with different places.
and have you stayed in contact with them as best you could?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Oh, we communicate.
And just
Now,
briefly-
Papa T has taken ill and is homebound now.
I was going to ask you,
He's had a stroke and is basically homebound. And Miss Kennedy stays at home and takes care of him. But they are wonderful people. Let me just go a little bit further. Wonderful people in and of themselves, but their relationship was absolutely great.
Jamar, I want to go back to that morning of June the 8th when you were down at the kennel cleaning up. Do you remember making a promise that morning?
Well, Jim, as I've told y'all that y'all know what I saw, y'all know what I was doing. It was difficult. it was nearly impossible. I, in my mind and out loud, I told Paul I loved him. I told him, I don't know, I loved him, and I promised him that I'd find out who did this to him. You just don't know what to do, but it was tough.
And you promised him you would find out who did this to him.
Yes, sir, I did.
Have you found out?
I have not.
All right. Thank you, Your Honor. That's all the questions I have.
Good afternoon, Mr. Murdaugh.
Good afternoon.
I think you'd agree with me that no matter which way you cut it, your family suffered a great tragedy, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
And
Including the death of my dad and the sickness of my mom. I mean, it's tough.
And I'm sorry you and your family's been through this.
Well, thank you.
All right. Yeah, I think you testified a little while ago about the cooperation you and particularly your brother provided SLED. Is that correct?
Did I provide cooperation with SLED?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And to your knowledge,
I have and will continue to.
and to your knowledge, your brother was providing cooperation to SLED as well, correct?
I believe everyone in my family was. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. And would you consider that cooperation full cooperation? Not only for yourself, but your brother as well, from what you have observed?
I mean, to me, full cooperation. Yeah. I mean, it's wide open. You tell us what you need from me and I'll provide it. And I told him I would provide it.
And from what you've observed, your brother was providing the same full cooperation as well, correct?
Yeah. So I believe anytime that they asked to search something, anytime they asked to do something, they asked for information, it typically came to me, and yes, I would provide it.
Okay, I'm asking about your brother right now. I understand you have. But to your knowledge, did your brother provide full cooperation? Or did he tell you he was providing full cooperation?
Well, he didn't tell me, but
Okay.
it appeared to be obvious that by him giving them access to anything they asked for, that he was.
Okay. So when did you first learn that your brother was down at the kennels just before the murders? 2 days ago with the rest of us?
No. So obviously I went for an interview with SLED, the one I told you about, where we talked about the shirt, talked about the blood, all that. That was the reason for me being there, was to hear that audio. And I saw the kennel, and of course, at that point, I heard his voice, and I knew that was him.
Okay. You knew that was him when you saw that video, correct?
That's correct.
Or listened to the video.
When I listened to it,
Right. And do you recall the date of that interview when you first listened to that video?
I do not.
All right. Would you disagree with me if I said it was August 12th of 2022?
I have no way to agree or disagree.
Or at least during the month of August of 2022?
Again, I'm sure they have my interview recorded for that date, but
It was August 12th. Alex had his interview on August 11th. But it still wasn't August 12th, though. Because you see, they didn't get the jacket until September when they did the search warrant on Almeida. So he's getting him to lie on purpose. It's great. It was not August. It was September. I love cross-examination.
All right. Before August of 2022, at that interview, when you heard your brother's voice at the kennels, had he ever told you that he was down there just prior to the murders?
no, sir.
Did he ever tell you that afterwards, after you listened to that video?
No, sir. And I'm trying to think if we've been able to have an opportunity to even speak.
Okay. All right. So you would agree that if he had not told SLED that was not full cooperation, correct? If he had not told SLED that he was at the kennels just before the murders, he had not actually been fully cooperative.
What's your question?
Would you agree that that is not full cooperation?
By him not telling SLED that he was at the kennel,
Correct.
I would say that yes, he lied.
All right. So I don't want to go through the whole kind of vehicle shell game that we talked about earlier. It's confusing, probably to me most of all, but let's just focus on, so what was Paul's normal daily driver? What vehicle did he drive on a daily basis?
On a normal basis, he drove a white F-150 Platinum.
Okay.
And let me confuse you a little bit more, as
Okay.
I drive the identical truck.
Okay, all right. So you testified that Paul's F-150 Platinum was at Jimmy Butler's over the weekend?
It
correct?
was being worked on at Jimmy Butler's, that's correct.
And then Monday, there's a series of car swaps. I don't want to go through them, but at the end of the day, you end up in the F-250 farm truck, correct?
That's correct.
And Paul ends up in your F-150 Platinum.
Ultimately, he does. He drives a mom's car back to Alameda.
I know there's several swaps.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
I'm just kind of talking at the end of the day. And he drove your F-150 back to Moselle, that night, correct?
To Moselle, yes, sir.
And you testified that you came over later that night after Alex had called you about the murders, correct?
That's correct.
Where was your truck parked when you first got there? And we'll talk about how you got there in a minute, but where was Paul's truck?
Well, so first of all, that
Your
night,
truck, I'm sorry.
that's right. I know what you're saying. So when I got there, we didn't go anywhere near the house. I went straight to where everything was happening.
Okay.
As we went to the house later that night, I saw my truck. So it's probably 4 a.m, whatever time we were, 3 or 4 a.m. It was parked in front of the house, normally where you would park cars.
Okay. So just kind of straight out the front door?
That's correct.
And the keys that Paul had been using, do you recall were they left in the truck or have any recollection of where those keys might have ended up?
Well, they were sitting in the ignition. I mean,
Okay.
same place I always leave them.
Okay.
Because I drove it to Alameda that night.
And meanwhile, you were in that F-250 farm truck, right?
For a short period of time.
And that, refresh my memory, is that white as well? Or is that a
It's white as well. Yes, sir.
and it's broke down on you on the way to Moselle, correct?
That is correct. On
And you
Highway
left-
63.
All right. And you left it on the side of the road, correct?
I did.
Okay. And I think, did you call Chief Alexander at that point or?
Well, we were riding, we were driving separate cars, but together.
Okay.
And so at that point, he had gotten in front of me and I had to call him to tell him to turn around.
Okay. And he came back and picked you up.
Came back and I jumped in his car.
You
or
left the
truck
truck
or
there.
whatever. It's Suburban.
I'm sorry, I'm trying not to talk over you, my apologies. And you left the F-250 there on the side of the road?
I did.
All right, and rode with Chief Alexander to the property?
That's correct.
And were you aware that your brother Alex had loaned Chief Alexander money at several points over the past couple of years?
I was not.
All right, and you testified that you learned of your brother's opioid addiction the weekend of Labor Day of 2021. Is that correct?
Yes, and he just got told that his brother, the lawyer, had been loaning money to the chief of police in Yosemite. Or in Yosemite. But there's no corruption here.
Well, that's when it started coming out. Yes, sir.
So did you have any idea that he had a opioid or drug problem prior to that?
Prior to that, I did not.
Okay. So from your observations of him on a daily basis, he seemed to be sober at most times or not under the influence of any? Did you ever observe him under the?
Well, keep in mind now, so again, I'm not a lawyer in the firm. I live in Beaufort, so I don't see him daily.
Okay.
But our encounters usually would be during non-working hours. But even then, yes, I had no reason to think he was on pills.
Okay. All right. He's able to function pretty normally on a daily basis to your observations?
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay. So let's talk about the morning of June 8th. You said that you were the first person over to the house at Moselle that morning. Did I understand that
That's
correctly?
correct.
And you're the first person inside the house at that point?
That's correct.
And so do you recall when Blanca Simpson got there?
I don't. What I can tell you is I was the last to leave the house and the first to come back in.
So she would have gotten there some point after you?
Yes, sir.
That
And
morning,
and I've heard in testimony that instead of going to Moselle, she went to Alameda.
But when she came to Moselle, it would have been after you, correct?
I think the other folks were there as well. Yeah, but well after me.
Well, okay. And you testified about being in that, I guess some folks call it the gun room, when SLED came in and started looking at some of those guns in the gun room, correct?
That's correct. Well, I wasn't in the gun room. I was in the main part of the house.
Okay. Did you ever go into the gun room while SLED was in
I
there?
did.
Okay. Because I think there's a video and evidence, and we're not going to go dig it up, but of SLED with body camera footage, and I think you do appear a bit.
I think so. I think probably what, best recollection I have is I was in the main part of the house with Alec and family, and someone came and told me they were there and that they wanted to look around.
Okay.
And of course, I went to make sure that they had full access.
When you were in there, do you recall who was in there with you other than the SLED agents? Because there are several other people, correct?
Well, I don't recall without seeing the video. I saw the video. I saw Mark Ball. I saw Lee Cope. I saw the Agent McAllister, but I don't think I would have remembered that.
Okay, but there are several attorneys in there, though, at a minimum, correct?
Friends and attorneys, friends. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Was Chris Wilson in there at that time? Do you
You know,
recall?
I don't remember. I don't have any recollection of him being there.
Okay. All right, and then let's go to June 10th when SLED came over to, I believe it was Greenfield where they came
That's correct.
to interview. It was you, Buster, Randy, Alex. I guess that's 4, right? Is that all who were interviewed that day to your recollection?
Randy, me, Alec, and Buster. That's correct.
Okay. I think you testified that they didn't want to come inside. Is that what you testified to?
Well, I don't think they didn't not want to come inside because of any particular reason. I just think they wanted to get about their business.
So you don't recall?
I offered for them. I offered to come in, use the restroom, anything of that nature, drink water, anything like that, but they did not.
You don't recall Lieutenant Gint coming in and introduce himself?
Inside the lodge? I do not.
Okay. All right. And you've either been interviewed or sat in several interviews by SLED over the last few years, correct?
I've been in a few, yes, sir.
Okay. And I'm going to direct your attention to October 12th of 2010. Let me make sure I have that date correct. Or excuse me, not 2010. That would have been 2021. And I believe SLED came to your house that day. Do you recall that?
I do recall SLED coming to my house.
Okay.
Now, I can't tell you that's the date, but they certainly came.
This would have been the day that they interviewed both Buster and your wife that day. Does that help you out?
It does. I remember them coming. It
Okay.
was Agent Croft and I believe Agent Ryan Kelly.
Okay. And you sat into both those interviews, correct? With both Buster and your wife?
Well, I think the interview with one was an interview for Buster,
Okay.
and one was an interview with me and my wife.
Okay. All right. So you
That's the way I thought it was.
Okay.
I didn't think it was 3 interviews.
All right. And do you recall during that October 12th interview, the subject of this blue jacket coming up with Buster? Specifically, I'm talking about the one with Buster.
The conversation at my house,
Yes.
I do not recall it coming up.
So you don't recall SLED bringing up, asking Buster about a blue jacket on October 12th?
I do not recall that.
So you don't recall his response?
I don't recall him bringing up a jacket.
Okay. Do you recall Buster responding that he did not recognize the blue jacket that was presented to him?
I don't recall a blue jacket being discussed.
Okay. And I think you also looked at it. You don't recall?
They did not show me a blue jacket. There was no blue jacket discussion in that interview, to my knowledge.
Okay. Let's see. Beg court's a good one. Do you recall what Buster's response in that interview to being asked if that could be Randolph's jacket, to him saying if it's over $15, no, it wasn't?
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay what Buster said. He's asking to recall what Buster said.
I sustain the objection.
Well, yeah, because he hasn't kept his story straight at all. It's hilarious to me.
You agreed with what Buster said right afterwards. You don't recall that?
No, Mr. Conner, what I'm telling you is I don't recall any discussions of a blue jacket in that interview. I just don't recall that. I don't, so you asking me that, I'm just telling you, I don't know of any discussions about a jacket in that interview.
All right. You testified about driving up to rehab, I think that Monday after Labor Day, or excuse me, detox, correct? With
It
your
was
brother.
detox, that's correct.
And you said your brother kind of woke up startling as if from a dream. Is that what you testified to?
No, sir.
Okay.
I said that when I was driving, well, Randy and I were driving him from detox to the rehab facility down, and that was down in Orlando, Florida, is when that happened.
All right. And you said, and again, I want to make this as clear as we can. You said you thought that he was waking up in response to a dream about the night of June 7th. Is that, do I understand that correctly?
That is the way that's what it appeared to be to me. And that's, of course, I can't tell you what he was dreaming, but that's certainly what it appeared to me.
So you're not saying that because he said that, right?
That's right. He didn't wake up and say that. It was just such a startling, just the way he woke up out of his sleep. It was just so startling. It was fear. And it took him several seconds to realize that whatever he just saw was not real, or he was not living it.
Okay. You testified about the day of June 7th and the taking your dad to the hospital, him getting admitted, correct?
I did.
And that you and your brother Randy were sending out multiple group texts about your dad's status. Is that correct?
Well, I sent a text, and I believe Randy sent one as well,
Okay. And
along with phone calls. I know Randy and I discussed it on the phone as well.
if I understood your testimony correctly, and you said that June 7th was actually kind of a hopeful day. Is that based off of what the doctors were saying?
Well, yes, based on all the bad news that he's been receiving, it was one little piece of hope that, certainly if the doctor would have said at that point, you're going home on hospice tomorrow, it would have been, that would be the worst case. But him saying that there was hope, that it was pneumonia and not the cancer, that there was some breathing treatments that may help. It gave us some hope.
And you sent out at least one group text with this information, correct, to your family members, right?
I know I sent one. I could have sent another, but I know there was one.
Okay. And do you recall if your brother was included in that? Alex specifically was included?
I saw the record showing it, and so yes, I believe it was my family, and I think it was just our family, actually.
And so there was hope, at least on the afternoon, June 7th, that your dad who had pneumonia, which could potentially be treated, and there was a little bit of hope about that, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if your brother had told Janine Seckinger during that day that your dad was taking a major turn to the worse, that would not be truthful, correct?
That would be correct. And the testimony I heard is he didn't say that.
He didn't say what?
He didn't say it was terminal or dire or whatever you're saying.
Are you based it off of Alex's testimony?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if Janine
So,
Seckinger,
well, I can tell you this, if somebody said that day that it was terminal, one of two people is wrong, or both.
okay. All right. So if Janine Seckinger was told that,
If Jeannie Second just said that, she was wrong.
well, were you present for any conversations between your brother and Janine Seckinger on June 7th?
I wasn't.
One last thing, Mr. Murdaugh. Would you say that the Murdaugh name and legacy is something that's important to you and your brothers?
Yes, I think any family's name and legacy is important to them. Do I think my family's name is more important than yours or any of y'all's? No, I don't.
But it's important to your brother as well, correct?
I think he would feel the exact same way as what I just said, that all families are important.
Okay. No problem. No.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may step down.
Defense rests, Your Honor.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is the defense's case. And we will excuse you for this day and have you come back at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Have a good evening.
Now, once the jury is out of the room, he's going to do any, paperwork and things like that. The camera has to cut audio. Yeah, but yeah. So once the jury's out, they're going to do some housekeeping stuff, and we're going to learn exactly what we're in store for with the prosecution, because the defense has nothing else.
If everyone will be seated. The defense has rested any matters of law at this time.
Your Honor, we would, defense would just renew our motion for directed verdict on the grounds previously argued at the close of the state's case. That's all.
Mr. Waters.
Your Honor, again, we would rely on our arguments previously made that the motion should be denied. Be happy to answer any specific issues Your Honor may have, but I would rely on our previous arguments.
The motion is denied based on all the reasons stated at the close of the state's case. Now, with regard to reply, what do you have, Mr. Waters?
Yes, sir. We have maybe 4 witnesses, maybe 5 at this point in time. I'm hopeful that we could accomplish that in a day. Obviously, as is the nature of reply, we will, assess that tonight. But right now, I have 4 definite witnesses and perhaps a 5th that, as it stands right now, that we would have. I don't think many of them, except for one, would be very lengthy. And by lengthy, I don't mean exceptionally so.
Any comment, Mr. Harpootlian or Mr.?
Your Honor, I no way critical of Mr. Waters, but his estimate of time has been a little mushy, I think is a good way to put it. I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying this was going to be a 3-week trial, and now it's a 6-week trial. I'm just a little skeptical that we'll get it all done tomorrow. I'm just saying I'll be happy. I'll be ecstatic if it happens. But for planning purposes, perhaps maybe midday Wednesday would be a better. Pardon me? Oh, and somewhere in this process, Your Honor's indicated you would allow the jury to visit the site.
At
So
the close of the reply.
okay, so we're at, I guess, Mr. Waters' mercy to.
Mr. Waters, are these witnesses who you anticipate will contradict issues presented by the defense or address the credibility of matters raised by the defense?
It will be focused on issues that were raised during the defense case. Yes, sir.
All right. Okay. Well, 9:30 tomorrow morning. Have a good evening.
My theory still holds true thus far. I don't want it to be right, but like, yeah, the corruption goes deep and has for a long time. But yeah, I'll get that all organized with like links to all the things so y'all can see what I mean. I'll have that available tomorrow night. So thank you for being here. I absolutely love and appreciate y'all. Yeah. I'll catch y'all later.